Good morning, students. Welcome you all once again in the revisionary classes of Board of Studies of ICAI. So, good morning, Prashant. Good morning, Shaminathan. Good morning, Ravi. Good morning, Anushi. Good morning, Prashant. Good morning, everyone who are also watching offline this session and they are raising query through the Board of Studies live portal. Students, today we are going to cover a very interesting topic, right? And let me guarantee you that the question will always be asked from this topic because this is one of the very important standard from the examination perspective, from the industry perspective, from the real life perspective. This is very important standard, right? So you will always get a question in examination from Ind AS 116 leases, right? Students, we will revise this standard in two classes, today and tomorrow, right? So in the first 1 hour, I'll set the context and then I'll solve the important questions, complex questions, which is given by the Board of Studies of ICAI. And those complex questions consist of the questions from RTP, questions from the past examination, and questions from the study material, right? Ind AS 116 leases. Friends, let me tell you, this 116, okay, this is the new standard on leases. While when I say new standard, I mean to say this is the latest standard on leases. Prior to this standard, Ind AS 17 was notified, which was taking care of lease accounting. In India, Indian accounting standards were notified on 16 February 2015. And these standards were applicable for Indian companies from financial year 15-16 on a voluntary basis and financial year 16-17 on a mandatory basis, right? Of course, there was a phase-wise implementation. So when this standard was notified by MCA, when Ind AS were notified by MCA on 16 February 2015, Ind AS 17 was notified, okay? And friends, between Ind AS 17 and our existing accounting standard 19, there was no major differences. No major differences. But when we came to, further 5 year or 4 year down the line from 2015, so in 2019, a new standard was notified in line with the notification of the new standard of leases globally, right? So friends, from 1st April 2019, effective 19-20 financial year, this new standard on leases was notified. Ind AS 116 was notified. And this Ind AS 116 had changed the complete gamut of accounting for the lessees, right? There are two parties in the leases. One is lessor, another one is lessee. So this standard had changed everything from the lessee perspective, right? So the lessee accounting has changed dramatically. Lessor accounting remained largely unchanged. So whatever you understood, whatever you read, whatever you have gone through from the lessor accounting perspective in AS 19, it will still hold good in Ind AS 116. Okay, but between AS 19 and Ind AS 116, from the lessee perspective, there is a lot of changes. Okay, so let's move further. Friends, if I talk about the standard, what is covered by this standard? So this standard covers the lease definition. Okay, this standard covers what is the meaning of identified asset, what is meant by right to control the use of an asset. We will discuss these terms. This standard talks about largely what is meant by lease term, what is meant by lease payments, right? What constitute lease term, what constitute lease payments, what is meant by discount rate, what is initial direct cost, right? What is the economic life, how to recognize the lessee accounting at the time of initial measurement and at the time of subsequent measurement. So this standard talks about lessee accounting from the perspective of initial recognition and measurement and subsequent measurement. This standard also talks about remeasurement whenever there is a change in the terms and condition. So this standard talks about the remeasurement, lease modification, etc. Lease modification means modification in the scope of the contract. Then this standard talks about the lessor accounting. Again, in the lessee accounting, this standard, in the lessee accounting, there is no concept of operating lease and finance lease from the perspective of this standard, right? So good morning, Resham. Good morning, Sita. So this standard gives you no classification between operating lease and finance lease in terms of lessee accounting. But in terms of lessor accounting, the differentiation, the classification between operating lease and finance lease also still exists, right? So the standard talks about what is finance lease, what is operating lease, right? How to do the modification accounting. And in this standard, two important concepts are also there, which is sublease and sale and leaseback transaction. These two important concepts also exist in this particular standard. So friends, if the question has to test you in the examination, the most complex topic from Ind AS 116, probably you will have the questions from lease modification, you will have the questions from sale and leaseback, you will have the questions from the sublease, and you will have the question, of course, on the lessee accounting, because lessor accounting is pretty simple. Good morning, Mukesh. Yes. Friends, can you tell me why lease term and lease payment is important in this standard? Anyone who can tell me why lease term and lease payment is important in this standard? Yes. So one of the student has replied on the chat box. Yes. So he told, sir, lease term and lease payment is important in Ind AS 116 because we have to discount all the future lease payments. We have to discount all the future lease payments to arrive at the present value of lease payments. For that, we need the cash flows, I mean to say lease payments, and we need the time period also, so that we can discount. Very good. Very good, friends. So let me get more deeper into this standard from the revision perspective. And I believe and I assume that you guys have already gone through Ind AS 116, because this standard was covered in 5 to 6 classes. This standard was covered in 15 to 18 hour session in detail, with a lot of layman language examples, with a lot of practical examples, and with a lot of board of studies examples, right? Board of studies questions. And I have covered this standard in November 2024. So you can go through with all those 6 classes, and it will help you in getting your concepts clear, not only from the exam perspective, but from the interview perspective, from the real life perspective as well, right? Yes. So this is the slide which talks about this standard has impacted highly which industries. Friends, now coming to the definition of a lease. What is the definition of a lease? Typically, the definition of what is a lease? Lease is a contract. It's an agreement enforceable at law. It's a contract, right? And whenever there is a contract, it has to be between two or more parties, right? Lease is a contract between 2 or more parties, where there is a right to use or right to control the use. Right to use or right to control the use. Friends, in AS 19, the word was lease is a contract where there is a right to use of an asset. Right to use of an asset, right? But in Ind AS 116, the word is right to control the use of an identified asset, right? So right to use has been converted to right to control the use. and asset has been converted to identified asset in Ind AS. Okay. So a contract between two or more parties where there is a right to control the use of identified asset has been transferred for a period of time over a consideration. Means for a lease contract, there has to be two parties or two or more parties. So one has to be a lessor, another has to be a lessee. Right. It has to be over a period of time. It has to be for a consideration. Right. And the identified asset, the underlying identified asset has to be the underlying identified asset. Right to control the use has to be transferred. Right to control the use has to be transferred. Now, what is the difference between right to use and right to control the use? What is the difference between these two words? Right to use and right to control the use. So let's say Prashant. Prashant came to me. Recently, I bought my new Skoda car. Prashant came to me and he asked, "Sir, I want your Skoda car for 3 days." I said, "Okay." I hand over my keys to Prashant. Right? So I told Prashant, "Okay, Prashant, let's keep these keys and you can use my car for 3 days." And I'm giving some instruction to Prashant. Prashant, you have to get the fuel. You have to get the fuel uplifted in this car only from the XYZ, only from the XYZ petrol pump. Okay. You don't have to take more than 4 people in this car. Don't drive this car after 8 p.m. in the evening. Don't take this car beyond Gurgaon and beyond Noida from Delhi. Okay. So don't take this car to Agra or to Jaipur. So any outstation trip. I'm giving so many instructions to Prashant regarding the use of that asset, use of that car. Just answer me 2 questions. Whether Prashant has a right to use of that car, whether Prashant has a right to control the use of the car. So who is controlling the use? Am I controlling or whether Prashant is controlling the use? Whether Prashant has a right to use for these 3 days or not? First question. Whether Prashant has a right to use.
Yes, sir.
Right to use, but not the right to control, because you are controlling.
Yes. While Prashant has a right to use the asset, he has the key, he has the car. He will use the car for 3 days, but he is abide by my all the instructions. So I am controlling the use. Where Prashant can go, where Prashant cannot go, in which condition Prashant will drive, in which condition he will not drive, how many passenger and how many people he will keep in that car, right? So I am controlling the use while he has the right to use of that car, but I am controlling the use of that car, right? I am controlling the use of that car. Okay. So I believe you guys have understood the difference between right to use and right to control the use of an asset, right? At times, when question will come into the exam and the question talks about to evaluation, right? So students forgot to write right to control the use. Okay. The student normally writes right to use of an asset. It's not a right to use of an asset. It's a transfer of right to control the use of an identified asset. Is that clear? You understood the difference between right to use and right to control the use. Okay. Yeah. And it is not asset, it is identified asset. And it should be over a period of time and in exchange for a consideration. Okay. So my friend wants a car on a lease basis. He came to me and he told, "Alok, you have 2 cars. Why don't you give 1 car over a lease to me?" I asked him, "For what amount of time you need that car?" He told me, "I need this car for 2 years. I told him, "You are my friend, not to worry. Okay. Take this car, use it and return me after 2 years." Okay. So he asked, what is the lease payment? What is the rent per month? I told, you are my friend. I'll not take any money from you. Just use the car, keep the car in good condition and return it to me. Friends, is it a lease contract?
No, sir.
Why no?
Because consideration is not there.
Because consideration is not there. So one of the leg is missing, and hence, because consideration is not there, and hence it is not a lease within purview of Ind AS 116. My dear students, whenever the question will come into exam, believe me, the question is not pretty direct. If the paper is most simplest paper, question may be direct. But in Ind AS 116, when you land into the examination hall, or when you land into the industry in the practical life, right, things are not straightforward. Especially in Ind AS 116, you will find the cases for evaluation. You will find whether it is a lease contract or not within purview of Ind AS 116, right? In the examination or in the real life, you will get a contract where the first word is lease contract, right? So it is a lease contract, but it is not a lease contract within purview of Ind AS 116. So what happens if a lease is not a lease within purview of Ind AS 116? Then how the accounting will happen? Any idea? If something which is not a lease contract within purview of Ind AS 116, then Saminathan is right. He has written, sir, then we have to do the expense accounting, which is rent account debit to bank account, or rent account debit to lessor account, and lessor account debit to bank account. Very good, right? So simple expense accounting has to happen, right? Okay. So let's move forward, right? And let's get more deeper into understanding what is meant by right to control the use and what is meant by identified asset. First, I'll discuss identified asset. For being an asset to be an identified asset, it has to be explicitly or implicitly written in the contract. What is meant by explicitly written in the contract? And can you give me an example where it is explicitly written in the contract? The asset is explicitly written in the contract. The classic example is the property agreement. The classic example is property agreement. If you are living in a rented accommodation, or you have given a rented accommodation on a lease basis, I mean to say, if you are a lessor or a lessee, just see the lease contract, you will find the detail of the premises, which is an identified asset. I mean to say, the detail of the premises, the subject of the lease, underlying asset, the detail address of that asset must be captured in the lease contract. For example, lessor A has given lessor B on a lease basis the flat number A502, Premier Urban Society XYZ, Gurgaon, Haryana 122 right? So it means it is explicitly written in the contract. Or in terms of, there is a car lease contract, the number of the car, I mean to say, the registration number of the car, Skoda car, make and model number 2025, bearing the registration number BXYZ0025, has been given on a lease for a 2 years period. Okay, this is known as explicit. What is meant by implicit? For example, a company has given his factory on a lease basis to the lessee. Okay, in the factory there were 5 machineries which are installed, and there is some furniture and fixture and other assets, right? And this company has given this factory on a lease basis. So tell me, the machineries and furniture and fixtures are not explicitly written in the contract, but whether it is implicit or not, that those machineries and furniture and fixture is also provided for the use. Is it implicit or not? Implicit, right? If the factory is there, of course, everything within the factory is also provided on a lease basis, right? So friends, number one, the asset has to be explicitly or implicitly stated in the contract. Number two, the lessor does not have a substantive right to substitute the asset. The lessor does not have a substantive right to substitute the asset. And friends, in Ind AS 116, you will find the word used as a supplier or customer, right? So don't get digressed with the word supplier or customer. What is meant by supplier? In context of 116, what is meant by supplier? Resham, what is meant by supplier in terms of Ind AS 116? Resham, can you please unmute yourself? What is meant by supplier? Supplier means lessor. Supplier means lessor. And what is meant by customer? Mukesh, what is meant by customer? Customer means lessee, right? Supplier means lessor, customer means lessee. Okay? Yes. So the asset has to be treated as an identified asset when the lessor does not have a substantive right to substitute the asset. What is meant by substantive right to substitute the asset? Substantive right to substitute the asset means the lessor does not have a practical ability to replace the asset for his own benefit. For his own benefit. Okay. The lessor does not have a practical ability, or lessor does not have a right to replace the asset for his own benefit. Okay. Let me give you an example. And typically, airport. Have you guys visited to airport ever in your life? At least you can say yes or no.
Yes, sir.
Saminathan, yes. Prashant, yes. Mukesh, yes. What about others? What about others? Ravi? Resham, yes. Yes. Sita? Anushi? Okay. So most of the students have visited airport. When you went to airport, you will find there is a counter, boarding counter of airline companies, of aviation companies, right? Like Indigo, Air India, earlier it was Vistara also, Emirates, Kingfisher. Kingfisher is not there now, right? It was a Vijay Mallya's airline. So you will see a lot of, you will see lot of counters, boarding counters of the airline companies. Whether these airline companies boarding counter belongs to these airline companies, or is it on a lease basis? It is on a lease basis, right? It is on a lease basis. So they have a contract with the airport authorities of India, and airport authority is giving them on a lease basis. Now you know how the contract is. The airport authority says that, listen, Mr. Air India, I am giving you this space of 2000 square feet, right? And which is in front of gate number 2, where the major footfall came, gate number 2. Okay. Gate number 2, in front of gate number 2. But I am free to replace this space from any other space in front of any other gate, right? While I'll give you 2000 square feet of space, मैं आपको जगह तो 2000 square feet दूंगा, but it can be anywhere in front of any gate, right? Right now, the airport authority has given one of the premium location to Air India, which is, let's say, in front of gate number 2. Okay. So after 1 year, Reliance wants to Reliance wants to occupy that space for their Hamleys outlet. Reliance wants to use that space for their Hamleys outlet. And Reliance is ready to pay a good premium. to airport authority. So now airport authority is replacing this 2000 square feet on gate number 2 and giving it to Reliance and moving or shifting Air India to some other gates. Friends, here where lessor, who is airport authority, whether lessor has a substantive right to substitute the asset?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Yes. So lessor has a practical ability to replace the asset for his own benefit, right? So here Airport Authority of India, who is a lessor, he is replacing the asset, right? Replacing the asset means moving or shifting Air India 2000 square feet from gate number 2 to any other gate, right? So he's replacing the identified asset, replacing the underlying asset for his own benefit, because he is getting more money by leasing gate number 2, which is more than Air India. Okay. So students, in this case, the lessor has a substantive right to substitute the asset. And if the lessor has a substantive right to substitute the asset, whether we will call that asset as an identified asset?
No, sir.
No, answer is no. Even though this 2000 square feet was captured in the contract explicitly, but lessor has a substantive right to substitute the asset, this will no more be an identified asset, and hence it will not cover under Ind AS 116 leases. Why? Because it is not meeting the definition of a lease. You remember there was one leg which is identified asset. It is not meeting the definition of a lease, and hence it is not meeting the definition of a lease contract, and hence it is out of the scope of Ind AS 116. So friends, but all these airline companies are paying rent on a monthly basis. So what will be the accounting?
Expense account.
They are doing the rent expense account to bank. They are debiting the rent expense and crediting the bank, right? As simple as that. And this, I'm not giving you an example. This is the real life example. Okay. All these aviation companies are debiting their airport rentals as a rent expense. They are not creating right of use asset, and they are not creating lease liability as per Ind AS 116. Second example, let's say a lessor has given 5 cars on a lease basis to a lessee. Okay. And all these 5 cars are stated in the lease contract, right? Bearing their registration number, make and model, everything, right? So these 5 cars were dedicated to the lessee, that you have to use these 5 cars. Okay. This was explicitly written in the contract. And lessor is only replacing the car when the car will break down or car will require service. When the car will go to service, of course, lessee will need some car. So the lessor is providing the alternative car, right? And if the car will break down or meet with the accident, in case of a breakdown or meeting with the accident, the lessor is also providing the alternate car. In this case, tell me whether lessor has a substantive right to substitute the asset.
No, sir.
No,
Why? If no, why?
because it is not for his benefit. It is
Yeah,
not for lessor's benefit.
Yes. Yeah, Anusi, you were saying something.
Sir, same thing.
Same. Okay. So Anusi and Prashant. I think Prashant, you are there, right?
Yes.
Yes, you both are right. While lessor is replacing the asset, but it is not for the lessor benefit. Even lessor has a nuksan in that. Lessor has a loss in that. Lessor has to engage 2 cars, right? 2, I mean to say, one which is into service, or one is which is into the repairing center, and one which is used by the lessee. And lessor is getting money only for the 1 car. Instead of benefit, lessor has a loss. Okay. So you're right. And lessor does not have a practical ability to replace the asset in a normal scenario. So lessor is replacing the asset only when it is benefiting the lessee, not the lessor. Okay. So you guys are able to revise this Ind AS 116 identified asset concept, and I can guarantee you, even somebody who has not went through the detailed class, at least on this aspect, if he or she will listen this class, he or she will be able to understand what is meant by identified asset. Okay, right? I hope you guys have understood and you guys have enjoyed this part. Right. Let's move to the next part. Right to control the use of an asset. And Saminathan has given me two conditions of this as well. Right. What is meant by right to control the use of an asset? Means for being an asset, typically to be covered in Ind AS 116, identified asset has to be there and right to control the use of an asset must be there. Means it is the lessee who is controlling the use, not the lessor who is controlling the use. Controlling the use means number one, it is the lessee who is obtaining substantially all the economic benefit from the use of the identified asset. See, the word is use of the identified asset. The word is use of the identified asset. Okay. Means from the use of the identified asset, it is the lessee who is getting all the benefits, right? Not the lessor. Typically from the use. And let me give you an example. Probably few of you must have lived in the rented accommodation. Use the rented accommodation. When you are using the rented accommodation, I mean to say, let's say you have taken a flat on a lease basis. So who is enjoying the benefits from the use of the flat, whether it is a tenant or a landlord, I mean to say a lessee or a lessor? Of course, lessee is paying a rent. So lessee will enjoy the rooms, lessee will use the washroom, lessee will use the kitchen, lessee will use the balcony. Yes or no? Yeah, because lessee is paying a rent for that. So lessee is enjoying the benefits from the use of the identified asset. But from the sale of the identified asset, who will enjoy the benefits from the sale of the identified asset? Lessee or lessor?
Lesser.
Owner.
Owner. Who is the lessor? Lessee has a right to use. Lessee does not have a right to sell. Okay. So and I can tell you, so in one of the exam, not CA final exam of ICAI, in one of the global examination, the question was that, the right, the benefits from the right to sale of the identified asset was not lying with the lessee. Was not lying with the lessee. होना चाहिए क्या? In one of the question on IFRS 16, it was written that the benefits from the right to sale of the identified asset was not lying with the lessee. क्या होना चाहिए lessee के पास?
No, sir.
नहीं होना चाहिए. तो सही बात तो लिखी है. And you know how the students have interpreted? बताइए कैसे इंटरप्रेट किया होगा स्टूडेंट्स ने?
They must have interpreted that he did not have the right to derive economic benefit from it.
So they have interpreted that the lessee has not the right to use. The lessee does not have a right to receive the benefits from the use of the identified asset, right? Because in examination, you are into on the 7 horses, right? You are you have only 3 hours and you are just reading half words and shifting to the 5 words. It is more like that situation. So friends, the standard talks about, since it is lessee accounting, standard talks about right to obtain substantially all the economic benefit from the use of the asset should be lying with the lessee, not the lessor. Okay. And the lessee should have a right to direct the use of the identified asset. What is meant by right to direct the use? Right to direct the use means right to direct how and for what purpose. How and for what purpose. Okay. For example, when I have given my car to Prashant, right? So I was instructing how you will use that car and for what purpose you will use that car. I was instructing, right? So it means when I was instructing, so right to direct was with me, not with the Prashant. Okay, it was with me. But for example, instead of saying that how you will use the car, for what purpose you will use the car, probably if I would have said that Prashant, don't run this car beyond 120 kilometers per hour speed. Prashant, the service is due. So while you will use this car for 3 days, but please get the service done tomorrow and then use the car. In this case, who is controlling the use, me or Prashant?
Lessee is controlling the use
Why?
Prashant.
But
because
yes, yeah, please carry
be-
on.
because it is directing the lessor is only simply saying to use the asset carefully.
So protective right.
Right, sir.
So basically,
Which he
yeah,
has to get the property back in a good condition.
very good, very good. So the way you guys are explaining doesn't seems that you guys are CA final students. It is like I'm dealing with chartered accountants. Right, great. Yes. So basically, being a lessor, just understand. You guys have rented your accommodation to a lessee, to a tenant. So you want your property to return back in the good condition, right? Being a car, being a property, being some asset. So of course you have to give some instructions. You have to give some instructions so that you will get the asset back in the good condition. In that case, what happened in that case? The instructions which you are giving, so if it is protective in nature, then you cannot say that the lessor have a right to direct the use of an asset. Okay, for example, you being a lessor, you have rented out your accommodation to lessee, and you are telling lessee that I have given my flat, 3-bedroom flat, on a rent basis to you, and lessor is saying that in which room you have to create your bedroom. Okay, lessor is saying in which room you have to make your study room. Lessor is saying that for how many hours you have to switch on the light and switch off the light. Right. Lessor is saying that you cannot play music from 9 to 7, let's say. So lessor is giving these kind of instructions. So friends, is it a protective right or is it a operating instruction? These are the operating instructions, right? But being a lessor, if you are saying, see, whenever you leave from home, please lock the door. Okay, so that so that the dog or the cat will not enter into the house, right? Or any trespasser will not enter. So lessor is giving an instruction, whenever you have to leave, you have to lock the door. Okay, lessor is saying that please don't drink and don't play loud music in the night. So what are these? These are not the operating instructions. These are the protective instructions, right? Lessor wants to have a safe custody, right? So it is a protective instructions. So the lessee, if the lessee has a right to obtain largely all the economic benefit from the use of the identified asset, and the lessee has a right to direct the use, means the lessee finalizes that how and for what purpose the asset is going to be used, then you can say that right to control the use of an asset is lying with the lessee. Is that clear? Let me discuss this question. Okay. Not this. Yes, this one. Important question. Company MNO enters into a 15-year contract with power company PQR to purchase all the electricity produced by a new solar farm. Normally, you know what happened. So again, when student will see that in the question it is written as a sale and purchase. So they think that, okay, this question belongs to Ind AS 115, not Ind AS 116. Right? Is it the case? Answer is no. Answer is no, right? You have to evaluate the contract. You have to evaluate the contract whether it is 115 or 116. So this company MNO enter into a 15-year contract with power company PQR to purchase all the electricity produced by PQR. Who is a supplier? Who is a customer in this case? Yes. Yes, Saminathan. MNO is the customer, PQR is a supplier. From 116 perspective, MNO is a lessee, PQR is a lessor. Okay. PQR owns the solar farm. Who is the owner? Who is the lessor? PQR. And will receive tax credit relating to the construction and ownership of the solar farm. So who is getting the economic benefit in relation to the construction and ownership? Lessor, PQR. And MNO will receive renewable energy credit that accrue from the use of the solar farm. Who is getting the economic benefit from use of the asset? From the use of the solar farm? Solar farm is identified asset. Solar farm has been taken on lease. So who is getting the benefit from the use of the asset, which is a solar farm, and who is getting the benefit from the construction and ownership of the asset?
MNO is getting a benefit from the use of the asset and PQR because of the ownership.
PQR because of the
Ownership.
Yeah, very good, Anushi. So MNO is getting the benefit as a customer. MNO is getting the benefit from right to use, from using the asset, and PQR is getting the benefit from the ownership of the asset, right? So in this case, company MNO has a right to obtain substantially all the economic benefit from use of the solar farm over the 15-year period because it obtains the electricity produced by the farm over the lease term, that is primary product from the use of the asset, and the renewable energy credit, that is byproduct from the use of the asset. Although PQR receive economic benefit from the solar farm in the form of the tax credits, these economic benefit relate to the ownership of the solar farm. The tax credit do not relate to use of the solar farm and therefore are not considered in this assessment. Is that clear, my dear friends?
Yes.
Is that clear? Yeah, very good. You understood inception of the lease and commencement of the lease? Anyone who can tell me the meaning of inception of the lease and commencement of the lease? So guys, charge up. It is a revisionary session. We have to do a marathon. And I can tell you the wonderful initiative by the Board of Studies of ICAI by providing this free live virtual class where you get an opportunity to get addressed your questions, right? Live with the faculties. Okay, it is not recorded class. Okay, so whomsoever are attending, and I will request all of you to please cascade this to your friends as well, right? Because this is the morning session and FR is a scoring subject. And believe me, I'm not talking about myself. All the faculties have an academic experience and the faculties have an industry and practice experience as well. And this faculty knows where the student make a mistake, right? Because the faculties are not associated with India ICAI. Like I am associated with, outside ICAI also. I am associated with few universities, right? I'm also associated with overseas bodies. Okay. So my request is to, tell your friends to get the benefit by these classes as well. Like you guys are getting benefited. Okay. So what is meant by inception date of the lease and commencement date of the lease?
Sir, inception date is the date when lessee and lessor enters into the contract, whereas commencement date is a date when the lessee gets the right to use the asset.
Very good, Anushi. And I appreciate the clarity you are having on the concept. I appreciate that. you have all the potential, I would say, to score almost 100% in FR, because FR is a scoring subject, right?
Thank you.
Great. Yes. So you guys have the potential, I can tell you, right? And I remember, 18, 19 years back when CA Inter, I was the All India third topper in accountancy. And in 12th, I was the topper in accountancy. Okay. So accountancy, financial reporting, it is a very scoring subject. The only thing is you have to learn it by heart as well as from the mind. That's the key. Okay. So now coming back to the inception date of the lease and commencement date of the lease. Saminathan. So Saminathan came to Delhi for the CA final and pursuing the articleship. So he came to Lakshmi Nagar and he came to me that, sir, I need your flat, right? I heard that it is a 2-bedroom flat and you want to give it on a rent. I said, yes, Saminathan. So he came to me on 15th of March, right? So he asked and I told Saminathan, yes, my flat will be available by 15th of May. He came to me on 15th of March. He told, oh, sir, after 2 months. I said, yes. So I told him that the rent is 20,000 rupees per month. It is a 2-bedroom flat and you have to give me a security of 1 month also. Saminathan has given me a security, right? And he has agreed to pay 20,000 rupees per month basis. And he has agreed that, okay, sir, I will take the keys on 15th of May, right? So in this case, Saminathan, what is the inception date and what is the commencement date? Or anyone else except Anushi, anyone else? What is the inception date and what is the commencement date? While Saminathan has responded on the chat box that 15th March is the inception date and 15th May is the commencement date. Perfect. Yes. As explained by Anushi. Okay, no problem, Saminathan. His mic is not working. No problem. So as explained by Anushi, inception date is a date when the major terms and condition has been closed. Major terms and condition has been agreed or contract has been entered. And commencement date is a date when the use of the asset is started, when the asset is handed over, right? In this case, 15th March is the date when the major terms and condition was agreed, agreement has been entered, and 15th May is the date when Saminathan will get the keys for using that flat. Okay. So on the inception date, the parties will identify a lease, whether it is a lease contract or not. If it is not a lease contract, you just have to do the expense accrual accounting, and the lessor will classify the lease into finance or operating lease. Why the word lessor is used here? Why? Why not lessee? Why only lessor? Sita, would you like to attempt? Students, doesn't matter right or wrong. Please try to answer. You guys are getting an opportunity, right? This is an opportunity for you guys to interact with the faculty on a live basis, right? Yes, Mukesh. Again, so let me tell you, in Ind AS 116, the concept of operating lease and finance lease is not there from the lessee perspective. From the lessee perspective, if it is a lease contract, the lessee has to create right of use asset and lease liability. That's all. But from the lessor perspective, the concept of operating lease and finance lease still exists, right? And hence, it is written that lessor will classify the lease into finance lease or operating lease, right? The accounting will not start on inception date of the lease. The accounting will start on the commencement date of the lease. So commencement date of the lease, the lease will recognize, the accounting will start. The lessee will recognize the right to use asset and lease liability, and the parties will determine the lease term. So commencement date of the lease is the date when the accounting will start. Okay. Now coming to the lease term, friends, the lease term is non-cancelable period plus rent-free period. So what is the lease term? Lease term consists of a non-cancelable period of a lease, which includes the period from beginning from the commencement date of the lease and includes the rent-free period. So just to simplify, your lease term is equal to LT is equal to non-cancelable period plus rent-free period plus optional renewal period plus optional termination period. Okay. So non-cancelable period plus rent-free period plus optional renewal period if the lessee is reasonably certain to exercise the renewal period, plus optional termination period if lessee is reasonably certain that he will not exercise the termination period. Let me give you an example. A lessor and lessee enters into a contract, okay? And the contract is for 10 years. The first 1 year is a rent-free period. The first 1 year is a rent-free period. After 1 year, the next 6 years is non-cancelable period. Means doesn't matter when lessee wants to terminate the contract. For example, if lessee will terminate the contract in the second year, lessee has to pay the rent for the entire next 6 years, right? So out of the 10-year contract, first one is the rent-free period, another 6 is a non-cancelable period, and the last 3 year period is a period where lessee can terminate the contract. Okay, so it's an optional termination period. Now my question to all of you is, what is the lease term in this case? If the question has given you just these kind of facts, what is the lease term in this case? What is the lease term in this case?
So it will depend whether lessee is certain to exercise that option or not.
No, so in this case, tell me what is rent-free period?
1 year.
Plus, what is
Plus
non-cancelable period?
6 years.
Plus, is there any optional renewal period? 0.
0.
Plus, is there any optional termination period? 3 years.
3 years.
3 years is the optional termination period, but that period will always be taken into the lease term only if the lessee is reasonably certain not to exercise the termination period. If the lessee is reasonably certain to not to exercise the lease period, not to exercise the termination period, right? So if the question is silent, right, then you have to make an assumption. If you have to take this optional termination period as a lease term, you have to make an assumption that we are assuming that the lessee is reasonably certain that the lessee is not going to avail termination period. अगर lessee termination period avail नहीं करेगा, इसका क्या मतलब है? It means lessee will use the asset in that period also, right? But if the question is saying, now I'm flipping the question. 10 years is the total contract. 1 year is the rent-free period. Next 6 years is the non-cancelable period. In the last 3 year, right, the lessee can avail the termination period because every year there is a 10% of escalation clause, right? And probably by that time the rent was too high and rent was just like in line with the market rental or more than the market rental. So lessee can terminate the termination period. Lessee can terminate in the termination period. What is the lease term?
Seven years.
Sorry?
7 years.
7 years, right? 7 years. So friends, lease term is equal to non-cancelable period plus rent-free period plus optional renewal period if lessee is reasonably certain that lessee will exercise the renewal period. plus optional termination period if lessee is reasonably certain not to exercise the termination period. Okay. Is that clear?
Yes.
Clear? Okay. Very good. Yes. So if there is a termination clause is there. Okay. So termination clause is there means if there is a termination clause, then whether the termination clause has to be considered in the lease term or not. Okay. For example, if both the parties have a right to terminate, so you must have seen in the contract that lessor and lessee both can terminate the contract by giving a 1 month notice. Have you seen that clause? Have you heard that clause?
Yes, sir.
है ना, सुना होगा ना आपने? So if both the parties have a right to terminate the lease without any major penalty. So the term ends there and the contract remains no longer enforceable. In that case, optional termination period is not going to be considered. If both the parties have a right to terminate. Both means lessor and lessee. If only lessee has an option to terminate. अगर सिर्फ lessee के पास है तो क्या होगा? तब तो आपको देखना ही है ना. In that case, you will consider the optional termination period if lessee is reasonably certain to exercise or not to exercise.
Not to exercise.
Not to exercise.
Optional renewal period में to exercise and the optional termination period में not to exercise. अगर टर्मिनेशन पीरियड को एक्सरसाइज ही कर लोगे तो फिर एसेट को यूज कैसे करोगे? ओके, सो नॉट टू एक्सरसाइज. If only lessor has this right, lessee does not have a right to terminate. Only lessor has a right to terminate. Then, while computing the lease term from the lessee perspective, whether optional termination period has to be considered?
Yes, sir. Considered.
Yes, consider. Lessee के पास तो right ही नहीं है ना. For example, initial 1 year is a rent-free period, and the next 9 years is a non-cancelable period. Means only lessor can terminate. Lessee cannot terminate. तो lessee जैसे terminate करने जाएगा, lessor will say, pay me the full money. Okay, you can terminate, but pay me the full money. Okay. So if both the parties have a right to terminate, then optional termination period will not be considered at all. If only lessee has an option, then you need to see whether lessee is reasonably certain not to exercise. Answer is yes. Then you have to consider the optional termination period as a part of the lease term. And if the lessor has the right to terminate, lessee does not have the right to terminate, then of course optional termination period will be covered for computing the lease term. लेसी के पास तो राइट ही नहीं है ना. करेक्ट. परफेक्ट. Reassessment of the lease term, right? So Ind AS 116 requires the lessees to monitor leases for significant changes that could trigger a change in the lease term, and lessees are required to reassess the lease term upon the occurrence of either a significant event or a significant change in the circumstances which is within the control of the lessee, and it affect whether the lessee is reasonably certain to exercise or not to exercise renewal or termination or purchase option not previously included in its determination of the lease term. So let me give an example. Earlier, lessee, at the time of commencement of the lease, lessee was reasonably certain that lessee is not going to avail the termination period, and lessee has concluded that the lease term is 10 years. Lessee has concluded that the lease term is 10 years. After 3 years, right, in the market, the price of the property has started going down, and hence the rental has also started going down. So now the lessee is thinking that once my non-cancelable period will be over, because I have to pay for the non-cancelable period. So once this will be over, I will shift to the newer premises, to the new premises. So after 3-4 years, tell me now whether this optional termination period, whether the lessee is now reasonably certain that the lessee is avail, the lessee is not avail that the lessee will not is reasonably certain not to exercise the termination option. commencement date pe lessee was reasonably certain that the lessee is not going to avail the termination option. But after 4 years, now lessee is not reasonably certain कि वो avail नहीं करेगा, वो avail कर भी सकता है. तो क्या
Yes,
करें?
sir.
तो क्या करें? We need to revise our lease term. तो revise होगा तो क्या होगा? Of course, your lease accounting will also undergo a change, because earlier you were thinking that my lease term is 10 years and after 4 years, 6 years is still to go. But now when you are thinking that, oh, 3 years are like, I may not avail, I may avail, right? So the lessee is not reasonably certain that the lessee is not going to avail the termination option. Okay. So in this case, the remaining period is 3 years only. So in this case, of course, the revision of lease terms should be there. So the point is, you know, that lease term may be revised. And why it may be revised? For example, earlier you were thinking that you will renew the optional renewal period, but now you are thinking that you are not going to renew. Or earlier you were thinking that you are not going to avail the termination option, but now you are thinking that you are going to avail the termination option, right? So the judgment and the estimate which you have taken at the commencement date, if that will change, of course, there will be a revision in the lease term. And whenever there is a revision in the lease term, you have to revise your lease accounting as well. Okay. Is that clear?
Yes.
Yes. For example, let's discuss this question. Company N has taken 10 vehicles on lease for an initial period of 5 years with an extension option at the option of the lessee for a further period of 5 years at the same rental amount. Means 5 years is the initial period, primary period, and another 5 years is the renewal period. And the rental is same. So let's read further. The remaining useful life of the vehicle and the commencement date of the lease is 15 years. What is the primary period of the lease? What is the primary contract period? 5 years. What is the useful life at the time of commencement date of the lease? What is the useful life of the asset?
15 years.
15 years.
15 years. Company N has determined at the commencement that it is reasonably certain to exercise the renewal option and hence it has taken a period of 10 years for the lease. इसमें लिखा है कि reasonably certain to avail the renewal period. So 5 plus 5, what is my lease term? 10 years. Okay. At the end of 4th year, there is an announcement by the government at the end of 4th year. Total period lease term क्या था commencement date पे?
10 years.
10 years. Or at the end of 4th year, what is the amount? What is the period? What is the amount of the period which has to go?
6 years more.
6 years. So at the end of 4th year, there is an announcement by the government that all the cars of this particular model have to be discontinued from the road within 1 year due to the change in the pollution norms in the country. All the cars of this particular model have to be discontinued from the road within 1 year due to the change in pollution. Will the lease term to be reassessed in this case?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It has to be reassessed.
5 years only now.
5 years. So it has to be reassessed. The optional renewal period is no more a renewal period. I mean to say, the lessee is of course not going to, it is not reasonably certain. Lessee is 100% certain that the lessee is not going to be avail the renewal period. Right? Lessee is not going to renew. Okay. Lessee is reasonably 100% certain. So in the given case, as per Ind AS 116, announcement by the government to discontinue the underlying asset will prohibit the lessee from exercising the extension option that was already included in the non-cancellable period, and hence company N will reassess the non-cancellable period to exclude the extension option of 5 years. Okay.
Sir, in this case, we need to de-recognize the lease liability and right to use asset for the remaining 5 years.
Yes.
And we have to, difference we need to impact into the P&L.
So basically, you are Saminathan, right? Yes. So in this case, what will happen? In this case, of course, initially you have recognized your lease liability and right of use asset. Okay, you have recognized that for 10 years. So now after 4 years, you have the remaining lease liability, you have the remaining right of use asset, which you are going to depreciate over 10 years. So you have a 6 years equivalent of right of use asset and you have lease liability. So you have to de-recognize your lease liability. I mean to say you have to reassess that what is my remaining lease liability as of now, right? You have to reassess. And how will you reassess? Sitting at the end of the 4th year, what is my future lease liability? Sitting at the end of the 4th year, my future lease liability is equivalent to 1 year only, because I am going to pay only for 1 year, not beyond that. So my future lease liability is for 1 year. Okay. So when I take it to present value, I mean to say end of the 4th year, I am going to pay for end of the 5th year, that is 1 year. So I'm taking a present value, that is my present value of future lease payment. And I will compare that value with my existing lease liability. Okay. For example, my revised present value of lease liability comes at 100 rupees and I have 500 rupees of existing lease liability. So what I'll do, I will de-recognize 400 rupees. And when I'll de-recognize, I will debit my liability. What will I credit? If I have the right of use asset, I will credit my right of use asset. Okay. Let's say I am debiting my 400 rupees of lease liability and I have the right of use asset to the extent of 350 only. Then I will credit right of use asset 350 and I will credit 50 rupee in the P&L, right? So whenever I am debiting my lease liability, then I need to credit my right of use asset to that extent. And if right to use asset is not there 100%, okay, or so to whatever extent right of use asset is there, I have to credit my right of use asset. If any differential is there, it has to be charged to the P&L. Okay. Is it clear?
Yes,
Is
sir.
it clear?
Yes, sir.
Now, yes. Any question? Yes. So friends, since morning, we discussed that this lessee accounting has substantially changed in terms of Ind AS 116. The lessee has to create right of use asset and credit lease liability. We discussed there is no classification of operating lease and finance lease from the lessee perspective. We discussed the meaning of identified asset. We discussed the meaning of right to control the use of an asset. We discussed the concept like substantive right to substitute the asset. If the lessor has a substantive right to substitute the asset, it is no more identified asset. And the lessee should have a right to control the use of an asset, which means the lessee should have two conditions. The lessee should have right to obtain all the economic benefit from the use of the asset largely, plus the lessee should have right to direct the use of an asset, means how and for what purpose the asset is going to be used. Okay, how and for what purpose the asset is going to be used. Is that clear? Is that clear? Yes. So friends, then we discussed what is meant by lease term, and we discussed lease term is equal to rent-free period, because every lessee is going to avail the rent-free period, plus optional renewal, plus non-cancelable period, plus optional renewal period if lessee is reasonably certain that he is going to avail the renewal period, plus optional termination period if lessee is reasonably certain not to avail the optional termination period. Okay. So now we have reached to, so then we discussed revision in lease term, and now we have reached to the lease payment consideration. Time we have covered, now we are covering consideration. So my dear friends, from the lessee perspective, there is a 5 payments, which is known as a lease payments. From the lessor perspective, 5 plus 1, 6. There is a 6 lease payments, right? And what are these lease payments? Let me revise. First, fixed payment including in substance fixed payment less any lease incentives. Okay. Fixed payments including in substance fixed payment less any lease incentive. For example, the lessor and the lessee entered into a contract for 5 years. The rent is 10,000 rupees per annum and it is going to be increased 10% every year. So what is my fixed payment? 10,000 rupees. What is my in substance fixed payment? So today I am aware that 10% escalation is in every year. So I am aware that today is 10,000, in the next year it is 11,000. So this escalation becomes in substance fixed payment. Okay. Yes. Plus variable lease payment if it is depending on an index or a rate. Variable lease payment. Which variable lease payment? If it is depending on an index or a rate. Index or a rate means like if it is depending on a CPI, consumer price index, wholesale price index, inflation index, right? LIBOR, MIBOR, okay? So if it is depending on an index or a rate, right? These kind of wholesale price index, inflation rate, then it has to be covered into a lease payment. But if it is not on the basis of an index or a rate, but if it is on the basis of production, output, turnover, usage, for example, lessor and lessee entered into a contract for leasing a factory and how the rentals are planned. So the lease rent for the factory is 1 lakh rupee per month plus 2% of the turnover, plus 2% of the turnover. So what is the lease payment to be covered in Ind AS 116 in this case?
So turnover is not acceptable, then we cannot be able to fix it. That we will not consider based on the turnover.
So you are saying that only 1 lakh rupee has to be considered for the purpose of the lease payment, right?
Yes, sir.
Then, but lessee has to pay 2% of turnover also. For example, the turnover comes out at, let's say for the yearly turnover, comes out at 1 crore rupees and 2% of 1 crore is 2 lakh. Now lessee has to pay. What is the accounting for that?
If the turnover is fixed on the measurement date, then it is okay.
So on the commencement date, you need to look at the lease payments, right? And why lease payments are required? Because end of the day, when at the commencement date, when the lessee will create right to use asset. So what is the right to use asset? Right of use asset is equal to present value of lease payment. And what is lease payment? Lease payment is equal to fixed payment plus in substance fixed payment plus variable payment only depending on an index or a rate. Rate means not this turnover thing, right? Rate means like wholesale price index, like inflation rate, right? So if a lease payment is on the basis of production, consumption, turnover, then it is not considered under lease payment. And these kind of variable lease payment will be charged to P&L whenever it is accrued. It will always charge to P&L, right? So when the lessee is going to pay 2% of the turnover, which is, let's say, comes out at 2 lakh rupee in this case, it is going to be charged to the P&L, right? Plus exercise price of a purchase option, right? For example, lessee is reasonably certain there is a purchase option in the lease contract. You understand purchase option?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So by the end of the lease contract, so generally what happens in few lease contracts, so lessor gives a purchase option also so that the lessee will maintain the asset in like his own asset. And lessor also wants to, at times even in my practical life, I have seen people who are living in a flat on a rental basis, they are buying that flat because they came into a comfort zone, their sense of belongingness was there, their neighborhood was settled, right? So likewise, the lease contract gives you a purchase option, okay? And if the lessee is reasonably certain that the lessee is going to avail the purchase option, then whatever is the exercise price, that is also considered as a lease payment. Penalty for terminating the lease. The termination option is there and lessee is also certain that lessee is going to avail the termination option. And if there is any penalty for the termination option, that penalty is also going to be considered. I am talking about the commencement date. I am talking about the meaning of lease payment because these lease payments will be required. These lease payments are important for computing the right of use asset, for identifying the present value of the lease payment. Plus residual value guarantees by the lessee. So lessor is saying that, I am giving you my asset for 10 years and you have to maintain the asset in the good condition so that when I will sell the asset by end of the life, I will get at least this much of amount. Lessee is saying not to worry. I am giving you a residual value guarantee. Right? For example, 1 lakh rupees the residual value guarantee. Okay. So whatever you will receive from the market, let's say you will receive 60,000 rupees. So I will compensate 40,000 rupees. Okay. So if any guarantee which is given by the lessee on a residual value, it will also form part of the lease payment. Right? From the lessor perspective, all these payments has to be considered as a lease payment, right? Plus, since it is a lessor, it is an owner. So in addition to the lessee, if any additional person like residual value guaranteed to the lessor by a third party who is related or unrelated to the lessee, if any third party has given the residual value guarantee, that is also need to be considered as a lease payment from the lessor perspective. Friends, let me discuss the meaning of lease payment with the help of an example. Okay, please confirm if you have, please confirm if you are able to see my Excel file. Please confirm if you're able to see my Excel file.
So the last one was from
Yes,
the
sir,
lesser
visible.
perspective.
The last one is from the lessor perspective.
Okay.
So let me yes, lease payments. I hope you are able to see this Excel file on the lease payments.
Yes, sir.
Fixed lease payment. From the lessor and lessee perspective, both the payments will be considered. In substance fixed lease payment, it is also considered. If there is any lease incentive, if lessor is giving any incentive, that has to be reduced. Variable lease payment depending on the index or rate, applicable in both the cases. Exercise price in case of a purchase option is a part of the lease payment. Termination penalty, it is a part of the lease payment. From the lessee perspective, if this termination penalty is an outflow, from the lessor perspective, what it will be? Inflow. You understand ना? Fixed lease payment. अगर ये कहते हैं कि लेसी 100 रुपए देगा फिक्स्ड, तो लेसोर क्या कहेगा? मुझे 100 रुपए मिलेंगे, right? So the word is lease payment and it is outflow for the lessee and it is inflow for the lessor. Residual value guarantee by the lessee. Now coming to the last one. Residual value guarantee by the party related or unrelated to the lessee. It is not there. It is not there in the lessee part, but it is there in the lessor part, right? So this is the meaning of lease payment. This is the meaning of lease payments, right? Now let's discuss the example. Lease contract is for 5 years. Lease payment is 10,000 rupees every year. Escalation clause is 10%. Exercise price at the end of the lease term is 15,000. Residual value guarantee at the end of the lease term is 10,000. Assuming discount rate is 10%. Determine the lease payment for every year in the books of the lessee. In the first year, it is 10,000. What will be in the second year? 10% escalation है, तो कितना होगा? 10,000 का 110% होगा ना? Third year में क्या होगा? Third year में 110% of the 11,000. Fourth year में 13,310. Fifth year में 14,641. ये तो simple है ना? What is my fixed lease payment in all the years? What is my fixed lease payment? 10,000. पहले साल में 10,000. Second year में 11,000 minus 10,000. Third year 2,100. ये calculation clear है? Is it clear? Is it clear or clear?
Clear, sir.
Clear in mind?
Yes, sir.
Jatin, is it clear in mind? Jatin Kaushik? Clear, not clear? Okay. Yes. Is there any lease incentive in this question? No. Is there any variable lease payment in this question? No. Is there any exercise price in this question?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
15.
15,000.
And this exercise price is at the end of the lease term. 15,000 is at the end of the 5th year. Is there any termination penalty in this question? No.
No, sir.
Is there any residual value guarantee in this question?
Yes, sir. 10,000.
10,000. So this is the total lease payment. This is the total lease payment every year. 10,000, 11,000, 12,000, 13,300, 39641. The total lease payment is 86,051. This discount rate of 10% is given. What is the relevance of this discount rate?
Present value calculations.
Sir, for the present value calculation.
Yes. So these are the future lease payment at the end of 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year, 5 year. Now, at the commencement date, lessee has to recognize the lease accounting. So what asset lessee will recognize? Right of use asset. What is the meaning of right of use asset? Right of use asset is equal to present value of lease payments. And what is the lease payment? These are the lease payment, right? What is my present value factor? What is my present value factor? My present value factor is 1 divided by 1.1. This divided by 1.1, so on and so forth. Sorry. This divided by 1.1. This is my present value factor. What is my present value? 10,000 multiplied by this. This is my present value, right? This is my present value of the lease payment. This is my right of use asset. Okay. What is my accounting entry? Right of use asset account debit to lease liability. Okay. This is the initial entry. Right of use asset account debit to lease liability. Is that clear? Is that clear? Yeah. So what is discount rate? Discount rate is the borrowing rate, incremental borrowing rate. Okay. Yes. Now let's move to the presentation. What is initial direct cost? Directly attributable cost. Initial direct cost is a cost which is related to the lease. For example, brokerage, commission to the broker, stamp duty, legal charges, okay, payment to the existing tenant to move out. These are the directly attributable cost. Now, what is my right of use asset? My right of use asset is equal to present value of future lease payment plus any lease payment made on or before the commencement date. For example, the lessee and the lessor entered into a contract on 1st April 2025 for a period of 3 years. And the rental is 1 lakh rupee every year. Okay. 1 lakh rupee every year. On 31st March, the lessee has given an advance rent. The lessee has given an advance payment of rupees 1 lakh on 31st March. And they have entered into a contract on 1st April. I mean to say the commencement date is 1st April. On 31st March, the lessee has given an advance rent of 1 lakh rupee and the rent for year 2 and year 3 will be payable at the end of the year. What is my right of use asset? Tell me on 1st April, what is my future lease payment? First of all, tell me, what is my future lease payment on 1st April? 1st April को मेरी future lease payment क्या होगी? बताओ क्या होगी? So 1st April 2025, okay, year 1, 2, 3. ईयर 1 पे तो कोई पेमेंट नहीं करनी, ईयर 2 के एंड पे 1 लाख रुपए की पेमेंट करनी है, ईयर 3 के एंड पे भी 1 लाख रुपए की पेमेंट करनी है. ओके, और 31 मार्च को क्या किया, एक दिन पहले क्या किया, एक दिन पहले 31 मार्च 2025 क्या किया, 31 मार्च को 1 लाख रुपए की एडवांस पेमेंट कर दी, पहले ही कर दी एडवांस पेमेंट। 1 अप्रैल 2025 इज अ कमेंसमेंट डेट। बताओ क्या होगा इसमें, कमेंसमेंट डेट पे लेसी विल क्रिएट राइट ऑफ यूज एसेट, राइट ऑफ यूज एसेट, लेसी विल बी डेबिट, लेसी डेबिट करेगा ना राइट ऑफ यूज एसेट, किस वैल्यू पे करेगा,
Sir, 3 lakhs rupees, sir.
assuming discount rate is 10%, and right of use asset is equal to present value of lease payments, right? What is my future lease payment? Present value of future lease payment. What is my present value of future lease payment? Present value factor. What is my present value factor for the first year? 1 divided by 1.1. What is my present value factor for the second year? सेकेंड ईयर के एंड में पेमेंट जाएगी ना, यस और नो? समझ आ रहा है या नहीं आ रहा?
यस सर।
सबको समझ आ रहा है? आई टोल्ड यू ना, पेमेंट जाएगी सेकेंड ईयर के एंड में, ये मैंने एग्जांपल में दिया है यहाँ पे। व्हाट इज माय प्रेजेंट वैल्यू, व्हाट इज माय प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ फ्यूचर लीज पेमेंट? टेल मी फ्रेंड्स, प्रेजेंट वैल्यू। पहले साल में तो कोई पेमेंट जा ही नहीं रही, फ्यूचर में आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट फ्यूचर, राइट?
So 2,48,685. Sorry.
What is my, so let's say discount rate is 10%. Guys, this is one of the simplest question, right? अब मुझे बताओ 157 is the present value of future lease payment, and 1 lakh rupee has been paid on 31st March 25. Tell me the journal entries for that. What will be the entry on 31st March 25? What is the accounting entry on 31st March 25? भाई एडवांस रेंट दिया, accounting entry बताओ।
Lesser account debit 1 lakh to bank account 1 lakh.
Lessor account debit to bank account, right? You can debit lessor account or you can also debit advance rent also, right? So both are okay. कितना, 1 lakh?
1 lakh.
What is the accounting entry on 1st April? अब 1st April पे तो आपको commencement date पे you have to do the lease accounting. What is the accounting entry?
ROU to LL.
ROU to LL.
Right to
just debit to LL.
Right, yeah, right of use account 2,57,776.
What is my lease liability? Lease liability is present value of lease payments.
1,57,776.
157,776. Okay. And what about this entry? I have debited my lessor account already.
Yeah, to lessor account 1 lakh.
To lessor account. Very good. Lessor account 1 lakh. So what is my this thing? What is my lease? What is my right of use asset? This plus this. You understood?
2 lakh 50.
So yes.
Yeah.
So my right of use asset is equal to present value of future lease payment plus any amount paid on or before the commencement date. Okay. अगर commencement date पे या commencement date से पहले कुछ पे किया तो उसकी present value तो उतना ही होगी ना? Yeah. Plus, assuming in this question, there is an initial direct cost also. Example. In this question, there is a initial direct cost also. Lessee has incurred initial direct cost of rupees 25,000 for legal charges of lease agreement. लेसी को इतना पैसा और देना पड़ा 31st, जब 1 अप्रैल को लेसी ने अग्रीमेंट कराया, लेसी हैज टू पे दिस मच अमाउंट ऑल्सो. व्हाट इज द अकाउंटिंग एंट्री फॉर दैट?
Sir, we need to credit bank account and 25,000, increase the register of use account by 25,000.
Yes. So what is the accounting entry? Accounting entry is initial direct expense debit to bank. To bank by what amount? 25,000. 25,000. And then what you will do? To initial direct cost. 25,000. Now your right of use asset will be increased by initial direct cost also. Is that clear? Alternatively, what you can do directly, you can pass the accounting entry. Instead of doing this accounting entry, you can directly pass right of use asset to initial direct cost also, right? Instead of these two entry, what you can pass, you can directly pass right of use asset to bank, which is initial direct cost. Is that clear?
Yes.
Last item. Lessee, after the lease contract, at the end of lease contract, lessee has to incur the decommissioning liability of rupees 2 lakh. Of rupees 2 lakh. What to do with this decommissioning liability? At the end of lease contract, the lessee has to incur decommissioning liability of rupees 2 lakh.
Sir, we need to find out the present value of the 2 lakhs rupees for 3 years, third year.
Very good.
We need that.
Yes. At the end of third year, lessee has to pay the decommissioning liability. Present value factor is 0.751. What is the present value? 150,263. So what is the accounting entry? 2. Provision for decommissioning. Right? And what is the amount? Provision for decommissioning? 150,263. Is that clear? ये क्लियर है? और राइट ऑफ यूज एसेट क्या होगा? इट विल बी इंक्रीज्ड बाय 150,263. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
So your right of use asset will be debit, and this right of use asset is equal to what? Present value of future lease payment plus any payment made on or before commencement date plus any initial direct cost plus any cost of decommissioning retirement obligation, right? Yes, Manish, you have a question. Manish Indore wala. Yeah, Manish. Manish, I have seen that you have raised your hand. Let me know if you have any question. No? You can write on the chat box also. Yes. So friends, this right of use asset is going to be depreciated over a period of the lease. So for example, this is my right of use asset finally. So how this right of use asset will become zero and by the end of the 3 year? How this will become zero? Subsequent measurement. This right of use asset is going to be depreciated. So on every 31st March, there is an accounting entry. So year 1, 2, 3. What is the depreciation? What is the depreciation on the right of use asset? Depreciation net block. So what is the depreciation? 433,039 divided by 3.
1,44,346.
And what is the closing block? Net block is this minus this. Again, same depreciation. What is my net block? This minus this. Again, same depreciation. What is my net block? This minus this. Okay. But how this lease liability will become zero? See, the lessor account is nullified. First entry was lessor to bank. Now it is lessor is credited, right? So this lease liability is existing. Okay. This provision for decommissioning is also existing. How this will become zero? Subsequent measurement of ROU. Now, subsequent measurement of lease liability.
We need to increase the interest cost for the lease liability each year.
Yes. Year 1 to 3. What is my opening balance of lease liability? What is my opening balance of lease liability? 157,776 at the commencement date, right? What is my interest cost? At the rate of 10%. So basically,
10%.
the rate on which you have discounted, you will unwind the discount. You will unwind the discount, okay? Unwind the discount. So what is my interest cost? This multiply by 10%. Lease payment. What is my lease payment in the first year? फर्स्ट ईयर में लीज पेमेंट क्या है? फर्स्ट ईयर में कोई लीज पेमेंट है क्या? जीरो. वो लीज पेमेंट तो पहले ही हो गई, वो तो लीज लायबिलिटी का पार्ट ही नहीं है. जीरो. व्हाट इज द क्लोजिंग बैलेंस? व्हाट इज द क्लोजिंग बैलेंस?
Same value.
This.
Sorry, after interest.
This.
Add interest.
Add interest, right?
Add interest.
Yes. What is my opening balance in the second year? Closing balance of first year will become opening balance. Interest cost. Any payment in the second year? कोई payment है क्या? देखें.
Yes, sir. We have 1 lakh.
Is the payment. What is my closing balance? This is my closing balance. This will become the opening balance of third year. Interest cost. Is there any payment in the third year?
Yes, sir.
1 lakh is the payment in the third year. What is the closing balance? Zero. So basically you have to charge interest every year. Interest cost to interest expense to lease liability. This will increase your lease liability. And when you will pay, the lease liability will be reduced. You can see the difference between, the total lease payment and the interest cost is your present value. यही है ना present value? 157,776. This is the present value, right? तो अपना राइट ऑफ यूज एसेट भी 3 साल में जीरो हो गया और लाइबिलिटी भी 3 साल में जीरो हो गई. अभी और कोई अकाउंट है जो आपका अनसेटल्ड है? आपका देखो सब जीरो हो गया ना.
Decommissioning.
Provision for decommissioning. Yes. तो subsequent measurement for provision for decommissioning. Because ये आपका Ind AS 37 के हिसाब से चलता है. It is Ind AS 30 provision for decommissioning. Provision for decommissioning, right? What is the opening balance of decommissioning provision?
1,50,263.
What is the interest cost at the rate of 10%? जिसपे हमने इसको डिस्काउंट किया था. Is there any payment, not lease payment, any payment? Decommissioning की payment तो last में होगी, right?
Yes,
this
sir.
payment will happen at the end. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Closing balance. So payment 0. Closing balance this plus this minus this. Second year के opening में क्या होगा? Same. Interest cost this, payment 0. Closing balance this. Third year के opening में क्या होगा? ये same. जो आपका second year का closing balance it will become opening balance for third year. पेमेंट. कोई पेमेंट होगी अब? 2 लाख रुपीस पेमेंट थी ना यहाँ पे?
Yes, sir. 2 lakhs.
पेमेंट थी ना? So what is the closing balance? 0. This account is also settled. So have you understood this entire commencement date accounting, which is right of use asset to lease liability, how to account for your initial direct cost, how to account for amount paid on or before the commencement date, how to account for provision for decommissioning on the commencement date. Then there is a subsequent measurement like depreciation, interest cost, right? And how will you account for the subsequent accounting entries? So with the help of these entries and the calculation, I believe you are able to have an effective revision of this Ind AS 116 lessee accounting. Clear, A? Is this clear or
Yes,
clear?
sir.
Clear? So friends, it's 8:42 now. Let's have a 10 minutes break and we will start at 8:52 and we will do a lot of questions. Okay? We'll do some questions. Perfect? Friends, now I'll solve some questions, right? And I believe the word file is visible to all of you, and you can see the question number 5. Are you able to see the question number 5? Is the word
Yes,
file
sir.
visible to all of you? Okay, very good. Yes. So let's read question number 5, and we will solve this question, and we'll solve few other complex questions also to revise the concept, to to solve more and more questions. So I'll not solve the question which was there in the main session. So in this session, I will solve the question which is given by Board of Studies and which are different from the main session. Okay. And some critical questions. Entity X is an Indian entity whose functional currency is Indian rupee. INR is the functional currency. It has taken a plant on lease from entity Y for 5 years to use in its manufacturing process, for which it has to pay annual rental in arrears of USD 10,000 every year. In arrears means at the end of every year. So this entity is paying $10,000 is a consideration. 5 year is the lease term as of now. On the commencement date, exchange rate was USD 68. So the payment is not in INR, the payment is in the foreign currency, the payment is in the US dollar. The average rate for the year 1 was 69, and at the end of year 1, so on the commencement date, the exchange rate was USD 68. Okay. The average rate for the year was 69, and at the end of year 1, the exchange rate was 70. Okay. At the end of year 1, exchange rate is given, commencement date exchange rate is given. The incremental borrowing rate of entity X on commencement of the lease for a USD borrowing was 10% per annum. 5% per annum. What is the objective of this 5%?
Sir, for the discounting purpose.
For the discounting.
To find out.
Yeah. So lease term is given, your lease payments are given, and discount rate is given, and this is the foreign currency lease liability. Okay. So exchange rate is also given. Exchange rate on the commencement date, exchange rate on the reporting date is given. How will entity X measure the right of use asset and lease liability initially and at the end of year 1? Please suggest what should be my steps? What should be my next steps? How will I solve this question? Please suggest. First of all, what are my lease payments? What are my lease payments? First of all, just compute the right of use asset and lease liability in foreign currency, in US dollar, right? So how will I compute it? So let me do a computation. What is the lease term? Question number 5. What is the lease term?
5 years.
5 years.
What is the lease payments?
10,000.
Is it in advance or is it in arrear? Is it in advance or arrear? So
end of the year.
What is the difference between advance and arrear? So how does it impact your calculations?
If it had been in advance, then the present value would have been taken at 1 rupee.
Taken at 1, not 1 rupee, 1 for the first, right? So basically, for example, it is 5 year, and if it is in advance, so the first payment present value is multiplied by 1. The second payment present value is multiplied by 1 divided by 1.1. Okay, assuming 10% is the discount rate. So this is the difference. Okay, so the time value of money for the first payment is exactly same by what you are paying. Okay, year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What is my amount in USD?
$10,000.
What is my present value factor? वो लिखा है ना at the rate of 5%, right? दिया है ना discount rate? It is given.
5%.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Discount rate is given.
Given.
And it is in arrear, so 1 divided by 1.1. What? 5 or 0.5?
1.05.
1.05.
1.05.
स्टूडेंट से ये भी गलती होती है, पता है आपको? वो क्या करते हैं? दे जस्ट सिंपली write 1 divided by 1.5, 1.05. Okay.
Sir, first year will be 1, sir. We are paying at the end of the year.
We are paying at
End of the year, end of the each year. So first year will be 1.
So why it will be 1? If we are paying at the end of the year and we are doing the accounting on the commencement date, means today, sitting on today, we are paying after 1 year. If we are paying in advance, right? अगर commencement date पे pay करता, if I am paying on the commencement date, then it should be 1. But I am paying in arrear, means on the commencement date, sitting on today, I know that I have to pay after 1 year, after 2 year, after 3 year, after
Okay,
4
sir.
year.
Got it. Got it, sir.
Right. This is very important, right? If you just do first year as a 1, your entire calculation will be wrong. Entire calculation. Right of use asset will be wrong. Lease liability will be wrong, right? Everything will be wrong. So what is my present value of lease liability in US dollar? What is my present value of lease liability in USD?
68.
43295. 43295, right? So now on the commencement date, what entry I have to pass? Is it in INR or USD? Because the functional currency is INR. So I need to pass in INR. So what is my exchange rate? Exchange rate.
68.
68. Exchange rate on the commencement date is 68. Okay. So what is my present value of lease liability in INR? क्या होगा? मल्टीप्लाई तो करना है. How much? It is
29 lakhs 44,060.
Or 44, whatever it may be. Okay. What is my accounting entry on the commencement date?
ROU to LL.
Right of use asset. Asset account. Debit to
Lease liability.
lease liability. Right. So what is the accounting entry on the reporting date? This is on the commencement date, initial recognition measurement. What is the accounting entry on the reporting date? Now you will depreciate. क्या करेंगे? What is the accounting entry on the reporting date? Lease payment होगी. There will be a lease payment also, right? There will be interest, there will be a lease payment. क्या होगा? So this right of use asset के depreciation होगा. Depreciation
We need to provide depreciation for 5 years.
for 5 years. Depreciation to accumulated depreciation. Accumulated depreciation.
Accumulated depreciation.
Yes, on the right of use asset. And what is the depreciation? This divided by 5
years. 5,88,812.
Okay. And what about the lease payment, interest cost, lease liability? Tell me this right of use asset and lease liability. This right of use asset is a monetary asset or non-monetary asset? This right of use asset is a monetary asset or non-monetary asset?
Non-monetary asset, sir.
It's a non-monetary asset. And this lease liability is a monetary liability or non-monetary liability? Monetary liability. Friends, there is a concept of monetary item and non-monetary item, right? In Ind AS 21, the effect of changes in foreign exchange rates. You know what that concept says? So all these monetary items are required to be restated at the end of the reporting period, at the closing rate. जितने भी मॉनेटरी आइटम होते हैं उस मॉनेटरी आइटम को हमें क्या करना पड़ता है? मॉनेटरी आइटम को हमें रीस्टेट करना पड़ता है. All these monetary items are required to be restated. All these monetary items are required to be restated at the closing rate. Restated at the closing rate. जितनी भी मॉनेटरी आइटम होती है हमें उसको रीस्टेट करना पड़ता है क्लोजिंग रेट पे, राइट? जितनी भी नॉन मॉनेटरी आइटम होती है वी आर नॉट रिक्वायर्ड टू रीस्टेट. Non-monetary items are required to be continued at the historical rate, at the historical rate. Okay. So this right of use asset, see, we have the right of use asset and lease liability in the US dollar. Okay. Then we have converted it on the commencement date. So now this right of use asset is not going to be restated. But lease liability being a monetary item, it has to be restated on the closing rate. Right. You remember in the question, there is a closing rate also given in the question. You remember that?
Yes, sir. Given, sir.
Yeah. So average rate was given 69 and closing rate was given 70. Average exchange rate, closing exchange rate was given. So what was the use for that average and closing? So let me prepare the liability schedule also, because you need to compute the interest cost, closing balance, lease payment, right? So every time you need to prepare the liability schedule. And this liability schedule will be in US dollar because interest cost will also be in US dollar. Okay. US dollar में होना चाहिए नहीं होना चाहिए? First computation has to happen in US dollar, then we will convert it, right? Then we will convert it. I hope it is clear. Yes. Here opening balance. यहां तक कोई doubt? Interest cost at the rate of 5%. Then your payment, the closing balance. यहां तक कोई डाउट तो नहीं ना? Any doubt?
No, sir.
No doubt, sir.
Year 5. This question is talking about only first year accounting, right? What is my opening balance in USD? 43295. What is my interest cost at the rate of 5%? This is my 5%. What is my payment in USD? My payment is 10,000. What is my closing balance in USD at the end of the first year? This is what. So I will do this computation for entire 5 year, but the question is asking only for the first year. And I'm just doing this calculation for the purpose of the repetition, revision of you guys. Okay. Revision for you guys. This one. Payment is 10,000. This is my closing balance. Oh, sorry. It becomes 0, right? It's 0 हो गया.
Yes, sir.
Now I have to do the first year accounting only for the lease liability, for the lease payments. So in first year, what I'll do? Interest cost, like I have booked depreciation on ROU. I have to book interest cost on lease liability also. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Accounting entry on the reporting date, accounting entry for interest cost. Entry for interest cost. So what is the entry for interest cost? Interest
on lease liability to lease liability account.
Liability account debit to
Lease liability.
What is the accounting entry? What is my interest cost? 2165. But this is in USD. I have to convert it into INR. So at what amount I should convert?
Closing rate of the
Commencement date rate was 68, average rate was 69, closing rate was 70. At what rate I should cover?
Average rate.
Yes. Expense. It is throughout the year. It is not only closing. It is not closing interest. It is throughout the period interest, right? So interest has to be converted at average rate, right? Average rate. So 2165 multiply by 69. Interest expense to be converted at average rate. Okay. To lease liability. What is the entry for payment? Entry for lease payment. What is the entry for lease payment? It is at the end of the year.
Lease liability to cash.
Lease liability account. Lease liability account debit to bank. What is the amount which is going to be paid at the end of the year? 10,000.
10,000.
10,000 multiplied by what? 68, 69, 70. Closing rate. Because this payment
Closing rate.
The outflow is happening at the closing rate, right? So payment at closing rate. Right. This is the accounting. Any challenge? Any challenge in this accounting?
No, sir.
Initial measurement, subsequent measurement, depreciation, interest cost, conversion, monetary item, non-monetary item, Ind AS 21 concept, everything is clear? Is that clear? Right? Question number 5 is clear to everyone? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So this is the computation which is given here. Okay. What is the balance of ROU? So ROU is not going to be restated. ROU is like opening minus. So depreciation, net block of ROU. Okay. Yes.
Also, it is a non-monetary item.
It is an ROU is a non-monetary item. Okay. So now just a minute. I'm looking at the another question which I'll take. This is the lessor accounting that I'll cover later on. Yes. Now let's discuss question number 8. You remember in lease payment, I told you lease payment is equal to fixed payment plus in substance fixed payment less lease incentives. You remember that?
Yes, sir.
So let's discuss question number 8. How will entity Y account for the incentive in the following scenarios? So this question talks about the incentive calculations, right? Scenario A, entity Y, lessor, enters into an operating lease of property with entity X lessee. From the lessor perspective, it is an operating lease, right? But from the lessee perspective, there is no concept of operating or finance lease. Lease is a lease. Entity Y enters into entity Y enters into an operating lease of property with entity X for a 5-year term at a monthly rental of 1,10,000. Yes, Ravi, you want to ask anything?
सर वो क्लोजिंग बैलेंस लीज लायबिलिटी का वो ईयर के एंड में वो मल्टीप्लाई हो जाएगा 70 से जो कैलकुलेशन किए
Yes,
हैं
good question. Good question. Yes. Yes, Ravi. So what is my, let me So let me also write, in this question, what is my closing balance of ROU and closing balance of lease liability, right? What is my closing balance of ROU? This minus
Depreciation.
depreciation. What is my closing balance of lease liability? My closing balance of lease liability is how much dollar? मेरा closing balance कितना था डॉलर में? This is 3135460. Multiply by what? Multiply by closing rate. Monetary item has to be remeasured at the closing rate. Multiply by what is the closing rate? 70, which is given in the question. Okay, Ravi?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, perfect. How will entity Y account for the incentive in the following scenario? Entity Y entered into an operating lease of property with entity X for a 5-year term. Okay, at a monthly rental of 1,10,000. So my lease term is 5 years. My monthly rental is 1,10,000. In order to induce entity X to enter into the lease, entity Y provides 6 lakh rupee. Entity Y provides 6 lakh rupee to entity X at lease commencement for lessee improvements. लेसोर ने क्या किया? लेसोर ने 6 लाख रुपए दिए कि आप अपना लीज होल्ड इंप्रूवमेंट करो, मींस यू कैन रेनोवेट योर लीज प्रीमाइसेस. ओके, so how will entity Y account for the incentive in the following scenario? So lease term is 5 years, monthly rental is 1,10,000. So lessee will pay 1,10,000 every month. But this lessee, this entity Y, lessor has paid 6 lakh rupees to entity X on the lease commencement date. तो क्या अकाउंटिंग होनी चाहिए? लेसोर क्या करेगा? लेसोर ने इंसेंटिव दिया है.
Lease incentive to cash bank.
Lease incentive to
Cash
in
lesser books.
lease incentive. See, from the lessee perspective, this lease incentive has to be deducted, right? And lessor has to pay lease incentive. But lessor ने आज जो पैसा दिया है, what accounting lessor will do? Lessor क्या accounting करेगा? lessee तो क्या करेगा? Lessee will deduct from the lease payments. Okay, because lessee is recovering these payments. But what lessor will do? Lessor is paying. And lessor is paying for the lease improvement. And this property belongs to the lessor. So entity Y will record this as a property, plant and equipment. Lessor will record as a property, plant and equipment. Why? Because it is improving lessor's property, right? लेसोर तो ऑनर है ना, तो लेसोर की प्रॉपर्टी इंप्रूव हो रही है, जैसे आप अपना घर फर्निश करा के रेंट पे देते हो. ओके, सो लेसोर ने क्यों दिया? लेसोर ने इसको इसलिए दिया in order to induce entity X to enter into the lease. Entity Y provides 6 lakhs to entity X at lease commencement for lease improvements, for lessee improvements, right? So what lessee will do? So what lessor, here I'm talking about entity Y. So what entity Y will do? Entity Y will record PP and credit cash. Entity Y will credit cash and record PP. And this PP will be depreciated over a period of 5 years, of which is a lease term, right? And whenever the lessor will receive the monthly rental, what lessor will do? Bank account debit to lease income. तो लेसोर जो पैसा दे रहा है, लेसोर क्या करेगा? उसको एसेट रिकॉर्ड करेगा, प्रॉपर्टी प्लांट एंड इक्विपमेंट डेबिट टू बैंक. ओके, और लेसोर को जो उसके बाद क्या करेगा? 5 साल का लीज पीरियड है, लेसोर विल डू द डेप्रीसिएशन. लेसोर विल चार्ज द डेप्रीसिएशन ओवर द लाइफ ऑफ द लीज, which is depreciation to accumulated depreciation. and lessor को जो भी income आ रही है, since it is an operating lease, so lessor will debit bank and credit lease rental income. Okay, so this is the accounting lessor will do in the scenario number A. What is the scenario number 2? What is scenario number 2? Sorry, scenario number 2. Scenario number 1 is clear to everyone or not? Tell me, guys, is it clear, not clear?
Yes, sir.
This
Clear,
is
sir.
scenario number B, sir.
Scenario number B is clear.
Yes, sir. This is scenario B we talked about.
Yes, I talked about scenario B. Yes. Sorry, I have so basically, there is little bit confusion. So basically in the scenario A, because I know this question, so I have read it interchangeably. In scenario number A, it is lessee improvements, right? It is lessee's assets. In scenario number B, it is lessor's assets, right? So there is a simple difference in scenario number A and scenario number B. Okay. So let me correct myself. So like this lessor entered into an operating lease, period is 5 year, rental is 1,10,000, right? And this lessor is providing 6 lakh rupees to lessee. In scenario number A, this amount of 6 lakh rupee is to improve lessee asset. In scenario number B, this amount of 6 lakh rupee which lessor has provided to the lessee, it is for the leasehold improvement which is owned by entity Y. मतलब पहले सिनारियो में वो लेसी के एसेट्स की इंप्रूवमेंट कर रहा है, उसके लिए पैसा दे रहा है. सिनारियो नंबर बी में वो अपने एसेट्स की इंप्रूवमेंट के लिए पैसा दे रहा है. ऑफ कोर्स इट विल बी यूज्ड बाय लेसी ओनली, बट अपने एसेट्स की इंप्रूवमेंट के लिए पैसा दे रहा है, राइट? एंड इन बोथ द सिनारियो ऑफ कोर्स लीज लाइफ इज 5 years. In both the scenario. So what will happen in the first scenario? Instead of property, plant and equipment, it will be your deferred lease incentive. पहले सिनारियो में क्या होगा? लेसोर ने जो पैसा दिया, it will be deferred lease incentive to bank. Okay. And friends, I will recommend to use bank instead of using cash. Okay. After at least Modi ji, after this demonetization scheme, okay, so use bank, not cash. Okay. So what happened in scenario A, since it is lessee's improvement, so it is not lessor property, plant and equipment. So lessor will account for deferred lease incentive to bank, right? And what lessor will do? Lessor will record bank debit 1,10,000 to lease income 1 lakh and deferred lease incentive 10,000. So how lessor will do? So basically on a monthly basis, lessor will receive 1,10,000 rupee as an income. So bank debit 1,10,000, rental income 1,10,000, and this deferred lease incentive he will amortize over a period of 5 years. 5 years is equal to how many months? 60 months. 60 months means every month how much amount of expense is required to be recorded, or how much amount of liability is required to be reversed? Not expense,
10,000 per month.
10,000 rupees per month, right? So bank account debit 1,10,000, lease income 1 lakh, and your deferred lease incentive 10,000, right? Lease rental income is 1,10,000. It is offsetted by 10,000 rupees of lease expense, deferred lease expense, right? Scenario B, since it is an asset of lessor, so simple PP to cash 6 lakh, PP to bank 6 lakh. So bank to lease income 110 and depreciation to accumulated depreciation 10,000. Okay, is that clear? Instead of recording this entry as this entry, I would recommend to make this entry like this. Alternatively, should I write the entry? Alternatively,
Yes.
I am using bank account. Okay. So nothing is wrong. But bank account is more appropriate nowadays. Bank account debit 1,10,000. Sorry. 1,10,000 to lease rental. How much? What is the amount? Being
1,10,000.
rental recognized. income then lease rental account debit 10,000 to lease incentive. Being deferred lease incentive amortized over 60 months on straight line. Okay. So basically what happened when you read lessor accounting, it says that lessor will do the straight lining of lease rentals, right? For accounting rent in an operating lease, lessor will do straight lining of lease rentals. So this lessor will receive 1,10,000 every month for the next 60 months. To earning 1,10,000 for next 60 months, lessor has spent 6 lakh rupee. So technically speaking, right? So lessor is receiving the rental which is reduced by 6 lakh rupee. यही मतलब हुआ ना? इसका मतलब तो यही हुआ ना कि लेसोर को जो टोटल रेंटल रिसीव होता उसमें से 6 लाख रुपए उसने पहले ही दे दिए. इसका मतलब उसको 6 लाख रुपए से कम रेंटल रिसीव हुआ, राइट?
यस सर.
तो लेसोर क्या कहेगा? मान लो कि आपने कोई घर किराए पे दिया एंड किराया इज 10,000, रेंट इज 10,000 रुपीज पर मंथ एंड इट इज फॉर 1 year. So what is your total rental income in a year? 1,20,000. In the first year, you have given, let's say 50,000 rupees to your tenant for whitewash. Okay. So effectively, what is the rent which you have earned in the first year?
70,000.
70,000. 120 minus 50, 70,000. Right. So, but initially you paid 50. Now you are recovering 10,000 every month. So you will pass an accounting entry of 10,000 bank account debit to rental income, but at the same time, you will amortize this 50,000 over 12 months of rental as well. For example, 4,200 or whatever, 4,100, right? So what you will do, you will deferred lease incentive liability, you will debit and liability, you will rental income, you will debit and liability, you will credit because you have created an asset for that. Deferred lease incentive to bank. Okay. I hope it is clear to all of you now. So we have covered this question number 8 also, question number 5 and question number 8. Now we will discuss question number Question number 6. We will discuss question number 6. This question is on identified asset, which is substantive substitution right, which is on right to control the use of an asset as well. Question number 1, case 1, scenario 1. The last mile is the name. Last mile is a dedicated cable that connects. I hope my Word file is visible to everyone.
Yes, sir.
The last mile is a dedicated cable that connects entity Y's network with the end customer's device. The use of this cable is at the discretion of the customer. Right? That cable, okay, that lane. Entity Y, you must have seen the cable, right? Data cables. Entity Y decide the location of endpoints. Entity Y means lessee. Lessee is deciding the location of the endpoint, has right to replace the lines that connect entity Y's network with the end customer. Okay. The use of this cable is at the discretion of the customer. For example, if I have to use the internet or I don't have to use the internet, I have to use the cable or not. Entity Y decide the location of the endpoint and has right to replace the line, which is dedicated cable. However, it is not practical to replace the lines since replacement would require additional cost to be incurred without any corresponding benefit. Whether the arrangement would be within the scope of Ind AS 116 Scenario number 1. Scenario number 2. If it is practical for the entity Y to replace the lines and entity Y would benefit from this replacement, would your answer be different? So friends, in this question, this entity Y, I think it is talking more from the lessor perspective, right? So basically what happened, entity Y is having a dedicated cable, number 1. Entity Y has a network, okay? So entity Y cable is used by the customers, okay? Entity Y is the one who's deciding the location, and entity Y has a right to replace the lines, okay? However, it is not practical to replace the lines since replacement would require additional cost to be incurred without any benefit to Y. Whether this arrangement would be within the scope of Ind AS 116, this is the question which is asked in this question, right? So number 1, have you understood this question? Have you understood this question? Yes or no? Have you understood or you haven't understood?
So in this case, Y is the lessor
Y is
and
the
other
lessor.
party is the customer, right?
Other card, yes. Customer is the lessee, Y is the lessor. Okay. That's why I've read it twice and then I have concluded that yes, Y is the lessor. In this question, Y is the lessor. Okay. So there are 2 scenarios which are given. Scenario number 1, right, which we have discussed. Scenario number 2. So basically, the difference between 1 and 2 is, in scenario number 1, it is written that the additional cost is required to be incurred and there is no benefit. There is no benefit to the Y. In scenario number 2, it is written that the Y would be benefited from the replacement. Okay. Y would be benefited from the replacement.
Scenario 2 would be 6116.
This is the case 1. Okay. Now we are going to discuss case 2. But before discussing case 2, let's conclude case 1. Okay. So what was the meaning of identified asset? When the lessor has so identified asset is an asset where it is written explicitly or implicitly in the contract and the lessor does not have substantive substitution right. Okay. But in this case, in scenario number 1, lessor does not have substantive substitution right. Why? Because lessor has to incur additional cost and lessor does not get benefited. But in scenario 2, lessor is getting a benefit. Okay. So let's discuss solution. I'm reading these paragraphs. You're not required to quote the paragraph number. Para 9, B9, B13, B14 of Ind AS 116 state the following. At inception of a contract, an entity shall assess whether the contract is or contains a lease. A contract contains a lease if the contract conveys the right to control the use of an identified asset for a period of time in exchange for a consideration. Yes, we discussed. To assess whether a contract conveys the right to control the use of an identified asset for a period of time, an entity shall assess whether throughout the period of use, customer has both of the following. What both of the following? The right to obtain substantially all the economic benefit from the use of the identified asset and the right to direct the use of the identified asset, right? And the right to direct the use of the identified asset. An asset is typically identified by being explicitly specified in the contract. However, an asset can also be identified by being implicitly specified at the time the asset is made available for use by the customer. It can be explicit, it can be implicit. Even if an asset is specified, a customer does not have the right to use an identified asset. Okay. If the supplier has substantive right to substitute the asset throughout the period of use. A supplier's right to substitute an asset is substantive only if both the conditions will exist. Number 1, supplier has the practical ability to substitute the asset. Number 2, the supplier would get benefit from the substitution. Okay. Then paragraph 20 of Ind AS 116 B20, it also provides guidance regarding identified asset in case of a portion of asset, that a capacity portion of an asset is identified asset if it is physically distinct, for example, floor of a building. A capacity or a other portion of an asset which is not physically distinct, for example, a capacity portion of a fiber cable, it is not an identified asset unless it represents substantially all of the capacity of the asset and thereby provide the customer with the right to obtain substantially all the economic benefit from the use of the asset. Okay. So paragraph B21 says that the control of the use of the identified asset, a customer is required to have the right to obtain all the economic benefit from the use of the asset throughout the period of use. Okay. A customer can obtain economic benefit from the use in many ways, such as by using, holding, or subleasing the asset. Paragraph B24 says that a customer has a right to direct the use of an identified asset throughout the period of use. If the customer has a right to direct how and for what purpose the asset is used throughout the period of use. We have discussed this. We have not discussed this physically distinct wala thing. What is this physically distinct? For example, a fiber cable. For example, a container which is carrying a gas. A container which is carrying a liquid, for example, oil container, right? For example, there is an oil container. And in the oil container, there is a capacity of 100 liter, let's say. Okay. So one company has leased that container for the 60% of the capacity. But can you say that this 60% is physically distinct out of that container? Can you say that I have taken the upper 60%, I have taken the left 60%, I have taken the mid 60%? Like in case of a floor, in case of a property, in case of a tangible asset, it is always physically distinct. You can say that I have taken this particular identified asset. Okay. Like I have taken second floor, first floor, third floor. But in case of a fiber cable, in case of an oil container, in case of where the capacity is there, will you be able to distinct with what belongs to the lessee? Will you be able to distinct it? Answer is no. No, right?
No, sir.
Hence, in case of a capacity portion, when the lessee has taken a capacity on a lease basis, it will not be considered as an identified asset, right? Until and unless the substantially all the capacity is used by that lessee. For example, if the lessee is using 95%, more than 90% of that capacity, then you can say that largely the entire container is used by the lessee, largely the entire fiber cable is used by the lessee. Okay. So always remember, my dear students, if it is fiber cable, if it is a capacity portion, and if the lessee is using the capacity portion, then the asset will not be considered as an identified asset until and unless the lessee is substantially using the entire portion. Okay. Is that clear? Is that clear? So these were the guidance which we have already discussed. Now coming to the case one.
One question, sir.
Yes.
So in 90%, we will consider that he is substantially using the asset, and 60% we will not consider.
Yes. So 90%, in standard, at many places, in US GAAP also, if you're using more than 90% or more, you can say that I'm using substantially. The word is not completely. The word in Ind AS 116 is used as substantially. It is not completely. There is a difference between substantially and completely, right? What is meant by completely?
Full use.
100%.
100%.
Substantially means more than 90%, 90% or more, right?
Okay.
So you can write this assumption also. So scenario number one, as per paragraph B, you are not required to write. Last mile is a dedicated cable which is an identified asset since it is physically distinct. There are no substantive substitution right with entity Y, as it does not have the practical ability to substitute alternative asset throughout the period of use. Thus, this arrangement is within scope of Ind AS 116. But in scenario number 2, entity Y can replace this and entity Y will get benefited also. Okay. And hence it will not be considered as an identified asset. Okay. Now let's discuss the case 2. Scenario 1, 2 of case 1, we have discussed case number 2. Customer X enters into a 10-year contract with a utility company. Okay. Customer X. Entity Y for the right to use 3 specified physically distinct fibers within a larger cable connecting Mumbai to Delhi. Okay. So customer X enters into a 10 into 10-year contract with a utility company. Customer X means lessee. Now entity Y for the right to use 3 specified physically distinct fiber within a large cable connecting Mumbai to Delhi. Customer makes the decision about the use of the fiber by connecting each end. Who is taking the decision of use? Customer X. End of the fibers to its electronic equipment. Entity Y owns extra fibers but can substitute those for customer fiber only for reason of repair, maintenance or malfunction. So owner जो है lessor के पास extra fiber है, right? And lessor can replace only in the need of repair, maintenance or malfunction. Means it is more like protective, right? It is not benefiting lessor. Useful life of the fiber is 15 years. Whether this arrangement is covered under Ind AS 116, tell me. Is it an identified asset?
Yes, sir, it is identified asset, sir, because the customer has the direction to how and what purpose
How
to
and
be
for what
used.
purpose the asset is used. But the lessor has a right to replace. Here the lessor has a right to replace. What happened?
That is not a substitute right, sir.
This right to replace is not benefiting the lessor. This right to
Yes,
replace
sir.
is only in case of some happening of an event, right? Okay. So in this case, again, I am reading this. Okay. The fiber are specified in the contract and are physically distinct and hence it is a identified asset. Further, the supplier right or obligation to substitute for repair and maintenance if the asset is not operating or if there is a technical upgrade required, right? So it does not preclude the customer from having the right to use an identified asset. Okay. Further, these rights such as right to operate or maintain are often essential to the efficient use of an asset. These are not the right to direct how and for what purpose the asset is used and can actually be dependent on the decisions about how and what purpose the asset is used. In accordance with the above, entity Y can substitute this fiber only when it is require a repair or maintenance. Okay. Entity Y is not getting the benefit also, and hence this arrangement is within the scope of Ind AS 116. It is an identified asset. Okay. Friends, then let's come to the case number 3. Same. Customer X enters into a 10-year contract with entity Y for the right to use a specified amount of capacity within a cable connecting from Mumbai to Delhi. The specified amount is equivalent to customer X having the specified amount. So customer X is the lessee, 10 year is the contract. Customer X is the lessee, 10 year is the contract. Entity Y is the lessor. For the right to use a specified amount of a capacity within a cable, not the full cable, a specified amount of capacity within a cable. A specified amount is equivalent to customer X having the use of the full capacity of 3 fiber, and this specified amount is equivalent to customer X having the use of the full capacity of 3 fiber strands within the cable. The cable contains multiple fiber with similar capacities, and this specified amount is equal to customer X using the full capacity of 3 fiber within the larger cable. Entity Y make decision about the transmission of data. Like entity Y lights the fiber, making decision about which fiber is used to transmit customer traffic. The useful life of the fiber is 15 years. 15 years is the useful life, right? The useful life of the fiber is 15 years. Whether this arrangement is covered under Ind AS 116. Tell me friends, ये Ind AS 116 में cover होगा या नहीं होगा?
नहीं होगा sir.
Why?
Yes, sir. For 3 cable, it is identified asset. Even though the supplier wise determined how and what to use on the initial stage. So it is only for 3 cable we can say it is identified asset for the customer X.
Okay. No, in this case, the question talks about, there is a capacity portion of this asset also, right? And this question talks about the entity is not using the full capacity. It is the capacity portion. So is it an identified asset? Number one. Number two, who is directing the use of the asset? Lessor is directing the use of the asset. It is the lessor who is telling you when to lit the fiber, when to transmit the data into the fiber, when to lit the fiber, when to start the network, right? And which fiber has to be used for litting the data, for switching on the network. So these all operating decisions are taken by the lessor, and hence this is not an identified asset. This is not an contract within the context of the lease. This is not a contract, right? Not a contract within the context of the lease. Is that clear? Is that clear to everyone?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Since the lessor is controlling the how
Yes.
to use and what to use.
You're right. You're right.
Okay.
So now I'm taking you to question number 1. And this question number 1 is like elephant's teeth, right? What is elephant tooth? वो कहते हैं ना हाथी के दांत खाने के और दिखाने के और, right? So this question number 1 seems like it is a big question, right? But when we will start solving this question, you will find this question number 1 is nothing. Yes, Ravi and Saminathan, you have raised a question. You have raised your hand. Yeah, please ask.
Sir, my question in the last case, so the specified amount is provided, it's equivalent to 3 fiber. In that case, if the see in the actual question, it's a supplier Y has the how and what to use. But if suppose if the how and what to use is lies with the lessee, in that case, the 3 fiber, is it identifiable asset, sir? Can we take that?
See, in this question, so let me come to the question again. What happened in this question? It is written that, the specified amount is equivalent to customer X having used the full capacity of 3 fiber strands. 3 fiber strands within the cable. And the cable contains multiple fiber with similar capacities, right? So there are multiple fibers, there is a cable and there are some, slots within the cables, right? So basically it is only using 3 fiber strands. Okay. So even in this case, if you read the answer also, so let me read the answer and then I'll conclude it. Okay. So para number B20 specifically provide that a capacity or other portion of an asset which is not physically distinct. For example, a capacity portion of an optic fiber cable is not an identified asset unless it represents substantially all of the capacity of the asset and thereby provide the customer with the right to obtain substantially all of the economic benefit from the use of the asset. In the given case, the capacity portion that will be provided to customer X is not physically distinct from the remaining capacity of the cable and does not represent substantially all of the capacity of the cable and hence it is not an identified asset, right? ये within larger cable बड़े बड़े केबल 3 नहीं है, वो केबल के अंदर ना बहुत सारे पोर्ट्स होते हैं, केबल के अंदर भी बहुत सारे आई वुड से जैसे पेयर्स होते हैं, उन पेयर में से 3 पेयर जो है वो एंटिटी एक्स इज यूजिंग, राइट? सो एंटिटी एक्स इज नॉट यूजिंग द फुल कैपेसिटी ऑफ वन केबल इटसेल्फ, राइट? उस एक केबल के अंदर मल्टीपल है, उस मल्टीपल में से 3 यूज हो रहे हैं, ओके, एंड हेंस इट इज नॉट कंसिडर्ड एज एन आइडेंटिफाइड एज. Further, entity Y makes whole decision about the transmission of data. So right to direct is also lying with the lessor. Even in this case, if the right to direct lies with the lessee, still this is not an identified asset. Okay. Right? Ye clear hai?
Right, sir. Clear now, sir.
Okay. Now let's come to question number 1, and this will be the last question of the today's class. So we covered question number 5, question number 6, and question number 8. Now I am covering question number 1. Feel Fresh Limited. The company is into manufacturing and retailing of FMCG product listed on the stock exchanges in India. So this company is into manufacturing and retailing business. And this is a listed company. One of its product is bathing shop, which the company sells under the brand name Feel Fresh. This company is into the detergent. This is also selling the shops and detergents. Okay. So one of the product is bathing shop. The company does not have its own manufacturing facilities for shop, and therefore it enters into arrangement with a third party to procure the shops. So this company don't have a factory, and this company is taking a factory, or this company is entering into a contract with the third party on a job work model, on an outsourcing model. The company entered into a long-term purchase contract of 10 years with Mrs. Radhe. Right? Company entered into long-term contract with Messrs. Radhe. Since this company does not have a factory, this company is job working, outsourcing, and this company entered into a 10-year contract with Messrs. Radhe to manufacture the soap. Following are the relevant terms of the contract with Messrs. Radhe. Following are the relevant terms of the contract. Point number 1. Messrs. Radhe has to purchase a machine costing rupees 10 lakh from the supplier as specified by the company. So Radhe has to purchase a machine costing rupees 10 lakh. Okay, as specified by the company. Who has specified that which machinery Radhe has to buy? This company, Feel Fresh, who is giving an order to manufacture shop.
Let's see.
The machine will be customized to produce the shops as designed by the company, right? And this machine will provide the output which is in line with the requirement of this company. This machine cannot be used by Radhe to produce the soap for buyer other than the company due to the design specification. And this machine is dedicated for whom?
Company.
For the company.
Let's
Radhe,
see.
yes, for this FMCG company, Feel Fresh. Radhe cannot use this machine for the other customers. The machine has a useful life of 10 years and straight line method of depreciation is best suited considering the use of the machine. By reading paragraph number 1, I mean to say the point number 1, it seems like this machine was entirely purchased for Feel Fresh. This machine is dedicated for Feel Fresh. This machine is of no any use for the parties other than Feel Fresh. Okay. And now how the company will pay? So what is the lease term? In this case, it is 10 years. Contract is 10 years. And this company, Radhe has purchased a machine for rupees 10 lakh and life of the machine is 10 years. The company will pay rupees 4.75 rupees per soap for the first year of contract. And now we are talking about consideration. We talked about the term. Now we are talking about consideration. And how the consideration is facilitated. The consideration, the company will pay 4.75 rupees per soap for the first year of contract. This is calculated based on the budgeted annual purchase of 7 lakh soaps as follows. और ये जो फील फ्रेश है, ये फील फ्रेश 4.75 रुपीस पर यूनिट देगी. और ये पर यूनिट कैसे आया? बजटेड एनुअल प्रोडक्शन ऑफ 7 लाख पे आया, परचेज ऑफ 7 लाख पे आया, राइट. वेरिएबल कॉस्ट 4 रुपी है, जो मशीन की कॉस्ट है, राइट. सो मशीन की कॉस्ट 1,74,015 डिवाइडेड बाय 7 लाख शॉप्स, वो 725 पैसा आई. राधे का मार्जिन 50 पैसा है एंड टोटल कॉस्ट to the company is 4 rupee 75 paisa. 4 rupee 75 paisa is total cost to the company, means Feel Fresh. And Radhe के लिए cost क्या है? 4 rupees 25 paisa. In case the company purchases more than 7 lakh, in case the company purchases more than 7 lakh, that is busted number of shops in the first year, then the cost of the machine, which is 25 paisa per shop, will not be paid for shops procured in excess of 7 lakh units. Right. So the cost of machine is 1,74,015 रुपी. ये 1,74,015 रुपए की कॉस्ट है, ईयरली कॉस्ट. ठीक है. इसको डिवाइड बाय 7 लाख किया तो 25 पैसा पर यूनिट आ गई कॉस्ट. अगर परचेज अगर बजटेड परचेज जो 7 लाख है इसके बियॉन्ड जाती है तो उसके बियॉन्ड यूनिट के लिए दिस 25 पैसा विल नॉट बी एप्लीकेबल, will not be payable for the amount in excess of 7 lakh unit. However, in case company procure less than budgeted number of shop, then the company will pay the differential unabsorbed cost of the machine at the end of the year. तो 174,015 के हिसाब से तो देना ही देना है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, इफ द कंपनी परचेजेस ओनली 6 लाख शॉप इन द फर्स्ट ईयर, देन द डिफरेंशियल अमाउंट ऑफ 24,015 कैसे आया? मान लो 7 लाख की जगह 6 लाख परचेज करती है कंपनी, तो क्या होगा? दिस कॉस्ट ऑफ मशीन इज अ फिक्स कॉस्ट, तो क्या होगा? 6 लाख मल्टीप्लाई बाय 25 पैसा, वो तो रिकवर हो जाएगा 4 रुपये 75 पैसा के अंदर. But 1,74,015 minus 6 lakh multiplied by 0.25, which is 1.5 lakh, which is 24,015 has to be recovered by the company to Mr. Radhe at the end of the year. Variable cost will be actualized at the end of the year. Variable cost तो per unit cost के साथ चलती है. Fixed cost आपकी 25 पैसा है. ठीक है. Whether point number 1 and 2 is clear to everyone? Point number 1 and 2, is it clear to everyone? Yes or no? Is it clear to everyone? Yes or no? Mr. Aditya, is it clear to you also? Okay. Now point number 3. The cost per show will be calculated for each year in advance, based on the budgeted number of shops to be produced each year. मतलब जो उसकी cost है, it has to be calculated yearly in advance, okay, based on the budgeted number of shops to be produced each year. An amount of 1,74,015 shall be considered each year for the cost of the machine for year 1 to 8. और ये जो 174 है, 1 to 8 की cost है, while calculating the cost per shop. Any differential under absorbed amount shall be paid by the company to Mr. Radhe at the end of the year. कोई भी unabsorbed amount है तो वो at the end of the year pay होगा. A charge of 1,74,015 per annum for the machine is derived using a borrowing cost of 8% per annum. For year 9 and 10, only variable cost and margin will be paid. So, year 9 and 10 में सिर्फ variable cost और margin pay होगा, but in year 1 to 8, a fixed charge of 1,70,000. So 1,74,015 का nature क्या है? Is it a fixed or is it variable cost? इसका nature क्या है? अभी तक क्या समझ आया? इसका nature fixed cost है. तभी तो fixed cost तो fixed होती है ना, तभी लिखा है ना कि this fixed cost of 1,74,000 has to be recovered basis 7 lakh unit, which comes out at 25 paisa. And if it is less than 7 lakh unit, so unabsorbed amount has to be recovered. If it is beyond 7 lakh unit, then in excess of 7 lakh unit, this 25 paisa is not required to be recovered. Why? Because this 174 is fixed. But the variable cost of manufacturing 4 rupee, which goes with the per unit output, that has to be recovered. But this fixed cost is not going to be recovered, right? So a charge of 1,74,015 per annum, matlab up to 1 to 8 year, this fixed payment of 174,015 has to be recovered. Okay, has to be recovered means this charge of 174,015 has been taken using the borrowing cost of 8% per annum. So what is the relevance of this borrowing cost?
Discounting factor.
Discount rate, discount factor. Radhe does not have any right to terminate the contract. Radhe means the job worker.
Lessee.
Radhe means lessee or the lessor? Feel fresh is the lessee, na?
Sir, lesser, sir, lesser.
Radhe is the lessor. Radhe is one who is manufacturing. Lessee who is the customer. Customer is one who is obtaining the goods. Feel fresh is the customer. So Radhe does not have a right to terminate the lessor does not have a right to terminate the contract, but lessee has the right to terminate the contract, which is feel fresh. However, if the company terminate the contract, it has to compensate Mr. Radhe for any unabsorbed cost of the machine. For example, if the company terminate the contract at the end of the second year, then it has to pay 10,44,090. And how it comes? So 1,74,015 multiplied by 6 years. Okay. मतलब 8 साल तो पक्के नॉन कैंसिलेबल है. If it terminate the contract after 8th year, then the company does not have to pay the compensation since the cost of the machine would have been absorbed. In the first year, the company purchases 5,50,000 shops at 4 rupees 75 paisa per shop. Evaluate the contract of the company with Mr. Radhe and provide necessary accounting entries for first year in accordance with Ind AS with working notes. Assume all cash flow occurs at the end of the year. Important. Friends, first of all, tell me, is it a lease contract? For identifying if it is a lease contract, is there an identified asset? Whether the asset is explicitly or implicitly written in the contract? Answer is yes. This machine is dedicated. This machine is dedicated, customized and purchased for this company only. Right? Number 2, whether the lessor has a substantive substitution right? Of course, no. वो तो machine ही customize करके इसके लिए लेके आए हैं, feel fresh के लिए. Okay. So this is an identified asset. Who has right to obtain all the economic benefit from the use of the asset? Who has? Feel fresh. The company has. Okay. So even the output cannot be produced to the other customer. The output cannot be produced for the other customer from this machine. Okay. And who is directing the use? The company Feel Fresh. Lessee is directing the use. So this is an identified asset. Right to control the use is also lying with the lessee, who is the Feel Fresh. And hence it contains a lease. What is the lease term? What is the lease term? The lease term is 8 years is the fixed lease term, non-cancelable lease term, and 2 years is the cancelable lease term. So assuming that 10 year, assuming that the lessee is not going to terminate, termination option is with lessee only. So assuming lessee is not going to terminate, as the cost of the machine will be recovered in 8 years, and in the 9th and 10th year, the cost will be little lesser, and hence it is high chances that the lessee will not terminate the contract. So we are assuming the lease term as a 10 year. Now, what is the lease payment in this case? What is the lease payment in this case? बताओ lease payment क्या है इस केस में?
Sir, 8 years plus 2 years, 10 years, sir. Because the lessor only has the termination right.
Lessee has the termination right, not lessor. Lessee. कंपनी के पास है ना फील फ्रेश, राधे के पास नहीं है टर्मिनेशन राइट. ओके, सो कंपनी के पास है. So now what are the lease payment? Let's discuss about lease payment. What is the formula of lease payment? Fixed lease payment plus variable lease payment. कौन से variable lease payment? Fixed lease payment plus in substance lease payment minus lease incentive plus variable lease payment depending on an index or a rate plus exercise price of a purchase option plus termination penalty, right? Plus residual value guarantee. In this question, is there any fixed payment or in substance fixed payment? अभी तक मैंने जो भी बताया इसमें से कोई भी फिक्स्ड या इन सबस्टेंस फिक्स्ड पेमेंट है जो द कंपनी हैज टू पे एट अ मिनिमम करना ही करना है? कोई फिक्स्ड पेमेंट है?
174.
1,74,015 rupees the fixed payment which the company has to pay. वो लिखा था ना कि वो 25 पैसा 7 लाख के हिसाब से है, बट अगर कम होगा आउटपुट तो क्या होगा? जो रिमेनिंग है वो पे करना ही करना है. सो इसका मतलब द कंपनी हैज टू पे 174,015 एवरी ईयर फ्रॉम 1 to 8 ईयर. मतलब इन सब्सटेंट फिक्स पेमेंट है. कोई वेरिएबल पेमेंट है इस क्वेश्चन में? वेरिएबल पेमेंट भी है, and this variable payment is depending on the output. Whether this variable payment is depending on any index or a rate. क्या किसी कंज्यूमर प्राइस, होलसेल प्राइस, लाइबोर, माइबोर, MICR, RBI बैंक रेट नहीं है?
No, sir.
No, sir. Then, sir, whether this variable payment will be considered here?
No.
No. कोई एक्सरसाइज प्राइस है इस केस में? कोई टर्मिनेशन पेनल्टी? कोई रेसिडुअल वैल्यू गारंटी? आंसर इज नो. So here in substance fixed payment in the given lease contract are 1,74,015 per annum और उसका present value क्या आएगा? Shall I compute the present value for all of you? करूं मैं compute? सर कर दीजिए compute. Okay. So let me compute the present value. Right of use. Year, amount, present value factor at the rate of 8%, and this is present value.
94,014, sir. Sorry.
What is the amount per annum? 174,015. What is the discount rate for the first year? Because the cash flows are at the end. So 1.8 or 1.08? 1.08. Divide by 1.08. Is it for 10 year or 8 year? Fixed payment is for 10 year or 8 year?
8 years.
8 year. Okay. 10 lakh rupees. Because in the 9th and 10th year, there is no fixed payment. There is a variable payment. Okay. So what is the accounting? What is the accounting entry on the commencement date? ROU to lease liability. What is the amount? 10 lakh rupees. The amount. ROU to lease liability, right? Then, so this ROU to lease liability to initially recognize the lease liability and the corresponding ROU asset. Now, what happened at the end of the first year? What happened? Interest क्या आएगा? Interest का भी schedule बनाऊं? चलो बना लेता हूं. Question number 1. Okay. Interest का schedule बनाऊं या छोड़ दूं? बनाऊं? चलो बना लेता हूं. Lease liability schedule. Opening balance, interest cost, then payment, closing balance. Okay. What is my opening balance? कितना है? 10 lakh. Interest cost कितनी होगी? Multiply by 8%. What is my payment? My payment is 174,015. What is my closing balance? ठीक है ये? Is that okay?
It's not visible, sir.
It's not visible? Acha, sorry. Oh, I was working on the Excel file and I think my word was presented. So is that okay? Question number 1. This is what I'm doing, right? So
Yes.
what I have done, I have computed my present value, right of use asset to lease liability. Now I am computing lease liability schedule. Okay. This is my lease liability schedule. And this payment is for 8 year. In the 8 year, it becomes 0. There is no 9 and 10. Okay. Clear? So what is the interest cost? 80,000. What is the lease payment? 174,015. Okay. So at the end of the first year, interest expense to bank, interest expense to lease liability, right? Depreciation to ROU asset. You know, the contract period was 10 year and hence 10 lakh rupees the ROU asset. So 10 lakh divided by 10. 1 lakh is the depreciation. Okay. Then lease liability to bank or lease liability to Radhe to bank. 174,015. So these are the amount for fixed payments. Now what about the money which this company was paying to Radhe? You remember 4 rupees 75 paisa per shop was paying, and the actual and the actual cost was and the actual purchase was 5,50,000 unit. In the first year, it is 550 at 4 rupees 75 paisa per shop.
Expense to bank.
Expense to
Bank.
expense to bank, right? So cost of shop debit to bank, right? But at what value? 4 rupees 75 paisa. It will be at 4 rupees 75 paisa, right? Here the student made a mistake. Friends, ये जो fixed cost है, this तो already paid ना 174015, right? So at what value the cost is going to be recognized? You remember fixed payment, in substance fixed payment, variable payment. What is the variable payment in this case? This 4 rupee and 50 paisa, correct? So 5,50,000 quantity of the shop has to be multiplied by what? Has to be multiplied by, has to be multiplied by 4 rupee 75 paisa or 4 rupee 50 paisa?
450.
450, right? It has to be 450. So 5,50,000 multiplied by 4 rupee 50 paisa, 24,75,000 will be charged to P&L to record variable expense paid as the cost of goods purchased. This is a very good question on determining, is it an identified asset, whether the right to control the use of the asset will be there, then what are the lease payment, fixed payment, variable payment, then computation of the lease liability, right of use asset, interest cost, depreciation, and the variable payment to be charged in the P&L, right? I hope you guys are able to, understood this question very well, right? So what is the cost of the machine? See, from the lessee perspective, it is right of use asset, and right of use asset is 10 lakh rupee, right? So 10 lakh rupee has to be depreciated over a period of 10 years. Okay. Any further question? I hope you have enjoyed the concepts today, and I can guarantee you, even if the student will attend this class, which is a revisionary class, still the student will have a good 90-95% idea about the concepts as well. Yes, Ravi, you were asking something.
सर ये 1,74,015 रुपया जो कॉस्ट ऑफ मशीन का है सर,
हाँ वो फिक्स कॉस्ट है ना, वो 1,74,015 तो लेसोर आपसे रिकवर कर रहा है, राइट?
तो वो सर टोटल कॉस्ट है कि ईयरली वाइज कॉस्ट होगा सर? वो टोटल कॉस्ट
वो 1,74,015 रुपीज वो ईयरली रिकवर कर रहा है आपसे 8 ईयर्स तक।
अच्छा,
राइट। तो आप उसको पे कर रहे हो, यू आर अ लेसी, फील फ्रेश इज अ लेसी, तो आप क्या करोगे, उसका प्रेजेंट वैल्यू निकालोगे ना, तो प्रेजेंट वैल्यू आज की डेट में 10 लाख रुपीज आती है, जो मैंने आपको कंप्यूट करके दिखाया है।
ठीक है सर, ओके,
ठीक है। Any question? Any other student who has any question? If not, it is 10:15 now. So can I conclude the session?
Sir, is this assignment available in Board of Studies portal, sir?
Yes, this question is already uploaded by the Board of Studies of ICAI. They have uploaded. Right?
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other question? I hope you have enjoyed the session today. I hope you are able to understand. If you are listening me for the first time on Leases.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Good. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. I have enjoyed thoroughly, sir. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I would request each one of you that please cascade this with your friends in your classes, in your in your office. Just call up your friends and tell them to join this financial reporting classes. These are very helpful. As you guys have seen that you are asking the questions on a live basis, right? You are throwing your question and I'm answering you those questions. Okay. And these classes have been used by using the authorized material of Board of Studies of ICAI, right? And this is as per the curriculum of ICAI. Okay. These are the thoroughly 3-hour classes with 10 minutes break. And the faculty is covering all the important concept as well, right? Thank you so much. Stay safe, stay happy. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.